Hello, and welcome to Back Through the Lens, where two film school friends talk about movies through the haze of nostalgia, the good, the bad, and the ones that aren't quite how we remember them. I'm your host, Rachel, and with me is my co host, Joe.
Lights, camera, action. It's awards season, and for us, the Academy Awards is our big dance number. From who are you wearing on the red carpet to the speeches and to the music playing the winners off the stage. The Oscars can help propel a movie into popularity as well as into legendary status. For some of us, it's fun to see who wins and debate if the Academy got it right. In our episode today, we discuss a couple of Best Picture winners. And the Oscar goes to...
We decided we would do an episode like this about past Oscar winners because we actually never get to the theater to see current Oscar nominees.
This is true.
Yeah.
Try as I might.
Have you seen any of the movies that are nominated this year?
Oh God, I can't remember all of them. Dune 2?
Mm-hmm.
I believe, right? That's up for release Best Picture or lots of things. That might be it. There's a lot I've been wanting to see, whether in theater or streaming, and just haven't. Ironically enough, because watching movies for this podcast is a lot of time.
It is a lot of time. I have seen Emilia Perez, that is on Netflix, so that one's easy to access at least. Also, Conclave is on Peacock.
Yeah, oh my God, it's been on my radar.
The Substance. My husband and I watched The Substance. Wait, did you watch it?
No, it's like I'm trying to. I just don't have time. Ugh.
If nothing else, I really need you to watch The Substance before Oscar night so you can understand how bonkers it is that it's nominated for Oscars.
Mm-hmm.
Because famously, the Oscars do not really reward genre films.
No, they do not. I'm excited for that reason.
Yeah.
And just, it looked good. I've heard good things. I love Margaret Qualley, at least the few things I've seen her in. So yeah, I've been excited for that one because I've heard it was out there.
It was genuinely out there. We also saw Nora, which might be my favorite so far. To be fair, like I've only seen half of these movies. I haven't even seen Wicked yet. I'm waiting to be able to watch it with my mom.
Not that I had to go see this in theaters, but per this podcast, I'm kind of embarrassed. I haven't seen Wicked yet, considering the first episode was Wizard of Oz, my pick. Can someone just pay me to go to the theaters and so I don't have to go to my retail job? That'd be great.
I know, right? I always think about this when I used to have that internship where I would host the press screenings so they could, view the movies to write their reviews. Like, how can I get that kind of job where I would just be the critic that comes to watch the movies? I don't really know if is that really a job anymore? Unless you're like a legendary New York Times critic or something.
Right. I think you have to be more into, journalism than just also like movies than the other way around these days.
Yeah. And we potentially had to have been born like decades ago.
Right. So I saw one movie.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see Wicked. Yeah, I guess I've seen 5 of these. Do you have a guess, a completely uneducated guess as to what will win Best Picture?
Whew. Best Picture. I feel like Complete Unknown's probably going to win a handful of things, just because usually biopics are they're pretty well off as far as awards go.
Mm-hmm.
But Best Picture, I'm gonna say Conclave. I don't know why.
My pick was going to be... Okay, I'll go with The Brutalist because I was debating between Conclave and The Brutalist. So
I was also debating between the two. I know even less about The Brutalist. I just know it's like 15 hours long, and I mean, why not?
It feels like an Oscar winner. I don't know how else to say it. Both of those feel like kind of old school, like about serious topics, good cast. I wouldn't be surprised if either of those won Best Picture. My personal hope right now, I really liked Anora. I like Sean Baker a lot, the director of Anora. I liked his previous movies. I would also just love to see The Substance win because that would be insane. All right. Well, that being said, maybe one day both of us will have seen Wicked too, because it seems like I still can't believe I haven't. I love the stage musical of Wicked. I'm like such a theater kid.
I like the
Um,
book.
oh, I
Well,
did
the
like the
stage
book
play
too.
was good too. I'm not going to say it wasn't.
Hmm.
I think I didn't care as much once I found out it wasn't the full story. And like, well, I can maybe wait and then catch it before the second part comes out and almost do like a back to back viewing, one at home, go see the other one in theaters or something like that.
Hmm.
Get the whole thing in one go
It's true.
as best as I could.
Okay, so we locked in our best picture predictions at the very least. I feel like usually there's more of a front runner, I guess, or at least it's between two that everyone seems to predict like one or the other could take it. This year, not so much.
Yeah, it does
Um,
seem like an even playing field this year.
mhm. But by the time this episode is released, we will know. So we'll know if we got this right or wrong. All right. Well, we're going a bit more back in time with our picks. So my pick for Best Picture winner is The Apartment, directed by Billy Wilder, released June 15th, 1960. It is not rated because the rating system wasn't invented yet. November 1st, 1968, the new system replaced the Hays Code, a set of moral censorship guidelines.
Fair enough. If this was 1968 and there was a rating system, what rating would you have given this movie?
Oh boy.
Based on 1968 standards, obviously.
Based on 1968 standards, I would have said PG because PG-13 wasn't a thing.
Fair.
There are some, and I think that would have been correct actually, because I, out of today's ratings, it probably would have been a PG-13 based on the subject matter, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But there are movies like American Graffiti that are rated PG because simply because PG-13 didn't exist and they weren't, quote unquote bad enough for an R rating. Yeah, I think it would be PG. That's my educated guess.
That's fair. I
Mhm.
think so. It's not too raunchy.
If you have not seen The Apartment, it's about a man named C.C. Baxter. He works at an insurance company in New York City. He lends his apartment out to random higher ups in his company in order for them to conduct affairs. He falls for an elevator girl at his company, and things get really complicated. I can't remember when I first saw The Apartment, but I'm pretty sure in high school, I was trying to go through all those like AFI best comedies, best romances, that kind of thing. And I'm fairly certain it is on both the comedy and romance list. I wouldn't be surprised if I was also trying to see all the best picture winners, which I have never completed because, like, sorry to say, some of them look very uninteresting.
This is my first viewing. Surprise, surprise.
I think it's been such a long time since I've seen an older movie. I immediately was like, I get so excited and like nostalgic when I watch a movie like this where you have just the credits rolling in the opening with the music over them. It really makes me think of honestly like just being in my living room watching Turner Classic Movies all the time, trying to just like watch as many movies as I could.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I shouldn't have been surprised putting it on being the date that it is, but I remember sitting there, I was getting ready to take all my notes, got everything read up, set up, my drink, my beverage, my notes, my laptop, all the stuff. So I'm sitting there getting ready and I hit play. And for some reason, I was just surprised with the beginning. Maybe because it's been a while also that I haven't seen a quote unquote classic old movie. And I think I had the similar experience. Like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Just the music, though, this just the sound quality. Obviously, this is what 40, 60 something years ago.
Mhm.
The look of just the credits on the screen, how kind of plain they are, and
Mhm.
everything's at the beginning versus the end. Yeah,
Yeah.
it brought me back a little bit.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I say it makes me feel nostalgic, but it's not like I was alive for when movies did this.
Well, right, but you can have nostalgia for just anything. It doesn't have to be
Mhm.
from your time period. It's
Yeah.
you were on your couch as a little Rachel watching
Old movies,
TMC.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, Turner Classic Movies was definitely my gateway into like more
Hmm.
classic Hollywood movies.
Yeah.
So yeah. Uh we open with CC Baxter kind of narrating for us. He is introducing us to his office. By the way, it's November, which is going to be slightly important as we move through. We're starting in
Hmm.
November. He mentions that he lives on West 67th Street and pays $85 a month in rent in New York City. He
In
says he's like
1960.
I know, but still, he's like a block away from Central Park or something. He says he's
Yeah.
at least close to Central Park, like crazy. Um, he
Yeah,
often
it's hard to
works.
kind of relate money from such a long time ago when we weren't
I
even
know.
born. I mean, shit, when I first started driving, gas was well under $1. So it's just really hard to put that in perspective. But
Hmm.
yeah, I heard that too. I was like, oh, 85 a month Central Park, that's amazing. But then he also says he only makes $94 a week.
Yeah,
So I don't know. Again, I don't know if that's good or bad for 1960.
yeah. I guess I assume it's decent because his rent is like a week's pay, less than a week's pay.
Yeah,
I don't know. Groceries are probably a lot cheaper, right?
they're probably free back then.
They were free back then. Oh my God. Okay. Okay. So he makes a comment that he often works late, but not because he's a go getter. It's because he can't always access his apartment. We see him walking home. He sees lights on in his apartment window and he kind of like sighs and is like, can't go home yet.
When he is explaining that he often stays late, but not because he's a go getter, he first starts talking about that sometimes it's the weather, if it's yucky out,
Hmm.
and he doesn't quite get to the reason why yet. It just seems like he's a New Yorker, he has to commute.
Hmm.
Sometimes the weather's yucky, sometimes he can't catch a cab. And then when he finally gets
Hmm.
home, we see that he can't get in his house for some other reason,
Right.
which it never seen this before. It definitely tricked me.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you understand like, what he does in his apartment before you started this movie? Or what he does with his apartment?
Now I went in blind. I didn't look anything up. I just
Oh.
put on the apartment. Let's go. And then he's like I said, he's talking about his job. He's talking about how he stays late because he can't get home sometimes. You will see in my notes. I was like, what the fuck's going on here? I had no idea. And then I don't know. Maybe if it's the fact that you picked it and it's a rom com. I'm watching this. I'm like,
Mhm.
Rachel picked this. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. So I actually love that you went in totally blind because now that I had to actually take notes on this and pay more attention, it is a really nice, slow reveal of what the situation is. Like he gives you these little hints. And like I said, noticed it a lot more that I had to write things down.
Even when he's outside smoking, waiting to get in his apartment,
Mhm.
unless I missed something, it's not signified that it's his apartment alone. For a split second, I thought maybe he was being polite and waiting for this girl to leave because that's his roommate or something like that.
Oh,
Like
that's
I
a good
still
point.
wasn't fully sure yet what was going on
Mhm.
until
That
he
yeah.
started having to clean up after everybody.
Yeah, so when we see him, walk home, realize there are lights on his apartment, this apparently means he can't go in. He sort of waits off to the side, like on the other side of the stairs. You see a man and a woman come out, and the woman says something like, "First, you can't wait to get me in here," and then it's rush, rush, rush. And I think the man makes a comment like he told the guy who owns the apartment that he would be out by 8 and it's like an hour later or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he says the apartment belongs to some schnook that works in the office. And poor
Yeah,
Baxter hears it.
yeah. That's now. This is when I figured it out. I like when he's trying to leave, and she's like, "I'm gonna have another martini," and
Yeah.
the guy's like, "Oh, please, it's 8:45." I'm like, there's some sort of like statute of limitations of time when you can have a martini. But
Yeah.
then you realize he says, "Oh, we have to be out at 8." It's like, oh, they overstayed their welcome.
Right. I do like that this this man offers to walk her to the subway, and she's like, "No, no, no, you're getting a cab for me, and you're gonna pay for the cab." And he complains that all you dames live up in the Bronx, um,
Right.
but that makes her ask, "Wait, you bring other girls up here?" And he says, "Please, I'm a married man."
Yeah. At that line, I kind of thought, what did Rachel have me watch? What is going
Uh,
on here?
yeah,
My nose is
so
simply an emoji.
yeah. So we're learning a lot. Things are unfolding. Baxter finally gets into his apartment. His neighbor stops him to say that there's like always a racket coming from his place. And we assume it's probably the people that just left. He comes home or he gets into his apartment, sees he has a mess to clean up. The man who had been there with the woman stops back in because his date forgot her galoshes.
Yeah. And he starts talking about, oh, we're out of vodka and vermouth and this and that. And Baxter's like, well, you didn't pay me for the last time.
Yeah.
So he not only provides the apartment, but also, you know,
Apparently all their snacks and booze, right?
entertainment, the record player, the
Mhm.
cheesy crackers that he forgot this time.
Yeah, this guy's like, "I really wish you would restock those little cheese crackers or something." They're obviously asking a lot of him and obviously taking advantage because Baxter starts to explain that he would really like to get into his apartment at a decent time and, he has to go to work tomorrow. He hasn't even eaten dinner yet, and this guy, like, obviously does not care, says he's gonna put in a good word for Baxter at work. This is kind of the quid pro quo that we see. It's assumed that everyone who's using his apartment is probably a higher status in the office than Baxter is. And Baxter has extremely legitimate complaints, like wanting to eat dinner and go to bed. And these people not only are not allowing him to do that, not helping him, you know, pay for any of the food they eat or anything, but they're like, don't worry, I'll put in a good word at work. So that's about all he's getting out of this so far.
Promise at a potential. He's
Yeah.
getting intangibles. And yeah, during the scene, until you realize they work with each other, until I realized they worked with each other, I
Mhm.
was thinking, like, is he getting paid for any of this? Is he subletting his apartment? Are they
Mhm.
paying for the booze he's cleaning up? And then obviously 2 seconds later, I find out that they still owe him for that when he pops back in for the galoshes. I
Mhm.
like the relationship with his neighbor because the
The
when we
doctor.
well, we haven't seen the doctor yet, I don't think, but his wife when he's like unlocking his door, Baxter, that is.
Oh, maybe that's the one who stops him.
Yeah, and she's like, "Oh, what was all that noise while you were gone? I think you might have burglars."
Mhm. Yeah.
And then outside, the landlady also says something to him, like, "What are you doing out here? Why aren't you in your apartment?" He's like, "Oh, I'm just going for a walk." And he like cuts her off, like, "Good night." And he's like, she looks at him like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, and she keeps assuming he's lost his key or something because he's just, like, kinda skulking around the
Hmm.
front door waiting for people to leave. I do like when he starts cleaning up after this man and his date, he's bringing out a garbage bin, like, filled with bottles, like, empty booze bottles or whatever, and this is when we see the doctor, who is his neighbor. The doctor and his wife live next door to him. The doctor kind of makes a comment like, "You have to slow down. You're going to hurt yourself. I don't know how you keep partying this hard and having all these people over and drinking so much booze." And he asks Baxter to please consider leaving his body to the university when he dies because he wants to know how someone can drink and party so much and still be like relatively like, upright, like ready to go to
Yeah,
work the next day.
yeah. He's disposing of the bottles, and it looks like a college party.
Mhm.
And
Definitely.
the other thing he wants to know about Baxter's body is Baxter rents his apartment to apparently multiple people a day or a night. And the
Mhm.
doctor is inferring, first the doctor talks about all the booze. He's like, well, sometimes I hear what's going on in there, and sometimes it's 2 or 3 times a night. And it's like, whoa, what's going on? It's the walls are paper thin.
Apparently so, yeah.
Jeez.
Yep. I don't know if it's during this part, but we see later on when Baxter's, like, about to leave the apartment to someone else again, he puts, like, a sign on the record player saying, like, "You have to keep the volume down because the neighbors can hear everything."
Yeah, a
I do have a note that the doctor kinda looks like David Cross.
little bit. I can see that.
Okay. I like this kind of picture they're painting of Baxter when he does finally, settle in and make himself dinner. He's just heating up a frozen dinner. He makes himself like a little cocktail out of the booze that's been left by the people that were there before him. Sits down to eat his dinner in front of the TV, and he's like gets all excited because they're about to show Grand Hotel. Like you could see every time they name another actor who's in this movie, he kind of like his smile gets bigger and bigger and like, oh great, like I can settle in and watch this movie. And then there's an ad. And then he's flipping through channels and then he goes back to the movie. There's another ad. And it's sort of the feeling I got is when, I guess, in relation to maybe today's lifestyle, you get home
Mm.
from work late enough just to kind of like eat dinner, maybe have a moment to do something you enjoy, but then you just have to go to bed because you have to get up and do it all again tomorrow. And
Oh yeah,
that's the feeling I got in this scene of Baxter. Granted, it's a little different. He just couldn't get back into his apartment. He has just enough time to like eat dinner, maybe watch a movie that he was excited about or part of a movie. Can't even do that because there are so many ads and he just kind of like gives up.
I liked the. He had a little like remote on the side table. Literally, was like a turn tile, a turn dial,
Yeah.
and I don't think I've ever seen that before. Usually,
Mhm.
usually like when TVs had remotes, it was like a big clunky thing, or as my dad would say, I was the remote. I would want because they didn't have one.
Oh,
They had to go
yeah.
they had to go turn
Yeah.
the dial on the TV. I don't think I've ever seen that before, or if I have, I forgot all about it.
To add insult to injury for poor Baxter. He does finally go to bed. Another guy from the office calls and begs him to use his apartment. He's at a bar and picked up a girl. Baxter says something about like already being in bed, and the guy says, I only want the place for 45 minutes. And besides, it's only 11. And I was like, oh my God, that's so late. Just, being someone who's like pushing 40, has a kid and work, and like we go to bed pretty early because we have to be up early. I couldn't imagine having to get up at 11 and just like go somewhere, like so someone
Yeah,
could use my place.
yeah. I don't mind being up at 11, but usually I'm watching a movie.
Yeah, if I'm up at 11, it's because I'm in my PJs watching something in my house.
That's always the case, but sometimes it is. Most of the time, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Dobich, this guy was calling, he looked really familiar to me, and realized two things. He is in My Favorite Martian, and I think he's Glenn in The Stand, but
Like,
he was in the TV miniseries The Stand.
yeah, I was gonna
which-
say the miniseries.
Yeah, from the 90s.
Interesting.
The girl Dobich is with, she turns around and she's probably half in the bag because they're out partying at some sort of New York
Hmm.
club. Yeah, I had to pause it because I swear to God, I thought this was like a young Jennifer Coolidge. Just the way her face and her tone of voice. It is not, but it did throw me off for a second. I feel bad for Baxter because I still don't know what he is getting out of the situation.
Hmm.
But we'll see later he's trying to climb the corporate ladder, but I kind of feel
Yeah.
like he's just a pushover,
Yes. Hmm.
which I guess we'll also see later on.
Yes. But I did enjoy Baxter kind of like getting up and like talking to himself, like mocking this guy's voice. And the guy has a weird high pitched laugh. And all I could think was that we've just met this character and I already feel like he's cracking up. Like
Yeah.
in some other movie, cracking up to a way that we would see maybe like 3/4 of the way through or something.
So Baxter's outside. He like
Mhm.
hides under the stairwell while the cab drops him off, and Dobich and the girl get out of the cab. And earlier in the phone conversation, when he's trying to convince Dobich not to come over, he's like, "Well, I don't even have any booze yet. All this other stuff,
Mhm.
I have to restock the supplies." Dobich comes out of the cab with like 4 or 5 martinis and double fisting them,
Yeah, that
knowing
he
that
probably
there's
like took from the bar.
yeah, I would assume. But yeah, I thought that was kind of funny, knowing that Baxter is out of stock, and they just get out of the cab and it's swishing around, spilling everywhere, and his hands are full, so he couldn't even pay for the cab.
Yeah, and also the cab is 70 cents. When you say he can't even pay for the cab, like, she reaches into his pocket to get his wallet, and then he makes a comment like, "Okay, but put it back." And it's
Hmm.
like, is this woman trying to rob him? She says something about like, "Oh, this isn't actually your apartment," or something like that, and the guy says, "Don't worry about the old lady." Oh, I think because he says it's like his mom's apartment or something.
Yeah.
One squawk from her and she's out of a job, and Baxter hears this. So,
Hmm.
at this point, I think it's safe to say, like, Baxter's not getting anything out of this other than maybe just keeping his job, which is insane. I do like the doctor neighbor hears these people go up into the apartment and he yells, "Mildred, he's at it again." Baxter is like on a park bench in the cold as if he's homeless, obviously has a horrible night, shows up at work the next morning with a very obvious cold. This is when we are introduced to Miss Kubelik. Is that how you say her name?
I think so. I feel like every character was saying it different.
I know. I'm just gonna call her Fran because that's easier. We learn her first name is Fran,
Hmm.
played by Shirley MacLaine. It's very funny to me to see like younger versions of these actors that like I was pretty familiar with growing up, but only as older people.
Yeah, this is a
I
great time for me to point out that I think my first introduction to Jack Lemmon was Grumpy Old Men.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I don't know if we mentioned Jack Lemmon plays Baxter in this movie, and I think my introduction to Shirley MacLaine was Steel Magnolias. Okay, so Fran is an elevator operator, which is like such a thing of the past. It also seems like there's a head elevator operator who organizes the people into elevators and then like clicks something when they're ready to leave.
Oh, very odd to me. But
Hmm. We see, one of these guys who probably, you know, uses the apartment, make a pass at her. She definitely stands up for herself more than Baxter does. We can already see that. Like, she very clearly lets this guy know that she's not okay with him. Like, I don't know if he was grabbing her backside. I don't quite
I think he
remember.
was because she says like "hands to yourself, Mister" or
Yeah,
something
okay.
like that.
Mhm.
So I was assuming he attempted to cop a feel in some way, shape, or form. This
But
part of
yeah,
the movie, I'm getting Mad Men vibes.
yes. We're out of the elevator. Baxter calls Dobich. We see, or we hear rather, that Dobich made a mess on his living room wall. Did he say the girl threw something at him or something?
Something that she turned one of his paintings into a Picasso is what
Oh,
he
no,
said.
she wanted to, like, paint she wanted to turn the wall into a Picasso or something.
Yeah,
They
I
were
think she's.
probably drunk and partying. So, he never gave the key back to Baxter, so he could not get into his apartment, and Baxter is understandably very frustrated about this fact that he had to, like, sleep outside, and now he's sick, and this guy, like, does not care at all. I thought it was funny that Baxter takes his temperature at his desk, like, he just has a thermometer with him.
Yeah, just pulled it out of his pocket just
Yeah.
casually.
That's fine. We get a scene where he ends up having to call a bunch of the people at the office to move around their appointments to use his apartment because he wants to just go home and sleep, which means he can't let anyone use the apartment tonight, which ends up with him like kind of redoing the whole schedule.
Yeah, and the whole time he's worried about getting a promotion in this insurance company and how they keep bringing up how efficient he is. I sit here thinking, how efficient can you be at your job if you're spending 30 minutes on inner office phone calls
Yes.
trying to play Bordello? Like, it was just
Right.
so awkward. I mean, the scene's funny, but I'm sitting there thinking, like, this guy's about to get a conversation about his efficiency level. I'm like, it's kind of plummeting right now.
Well, and I think at this point too, you're not sure if they're actually going to put in a good word for him ever, or if this is just what they're saying to keep him quiet because like they haven't followed through on anything else in terms of like, even letting him back home. like, like not only are they making him pay for all the booze, like he literally had to sleep in a park.
Right.
Um, so I'm at this point, like, I guess as a viewer, I'm not convinced that these people are ever going to do anything for him, that he's just gotten himself in this big mess and he's not getting anything out of it. Basically, like, every man in the office, it seems, is using his apartment, or every man who's maybe of a higher status than him at work is using his apartment.
Yeah, I think there's 4 at the moment.
There are 4 main ones, I think, that we meet at least, but he's like we said, he's juggling all of them, and they're not very understanding if he has to, like, cancel or move them. I think one of the guys is like, it's his mistress's birthday, and he's like, "How am I supposed to explain this to her?" And I guess none of these people have ever heard of hotels. Are they worried about being seen?
I feel like it's more maybe they don't, it's like a status thing. Maybe they don't want to have their ladies upset they are getting motel.
Maybe. I feel like in Mad Men, they were always at hotels.
Or maybe they just are cheap and they have a free apartment to use.
Yeah, maybe it all comes down to that.
I mean, why pay for
Um,
something when you can get it for free, I guess.
so he gets a call that Mr. Sheldrake wants to see him upstairs. We've heard his name mentioned a little bit at this point. Sounds like he's kind of the guy that would be making the decision about whether to actually promote Baxter. Everyone who mentions putting in a good word for him, it's putting in a good word with Sheldrake specifically. So we see him interact with Fran a little bit more when he's getting on the elevator. He's all excited, telling her he might be getting a promotion. And she obviously thinks very highly of him, does kind of like, "You're not like the other men around here. You're actually nice." Oh, and he's the only one that takes off his hat.
Yeah, which
That
is
was
an
it.
old school thing, and we've lost that
Yes.
over time, apparently.
Yep. Speaking of old school, she gives him a flower for his lapel because he's worried that he doesn't look nice enough. And she takes the flower that she's wearing, like on her uniform, gives it to him. Baxter speaks with Sheldrake. Sheldrake says something like, "I was wondering what you look like." So obviously he has a reputation, whether it's about his work or his apartment lending. We don't know yet. They mention that he works late a lot without overtime. Like, this is one of the things that Sheldrake likes about him. I don't know. This man's just getting such a raw deal.
Yeah, did you get time and a half back in 1960 for overtime? Is that a thing?
I have no idea.
Hmm.
I mean, he's getting paid hourly, right?
Yeah.
I assume.
I don't know. Actually, it might be salary. It might be the $94 a week salary.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So if he was salary, he wouldn't get paid overtime anyway.
Although I guess if my options were being in the office or like a park bench at midnight, at least you're indoors at the office. I don't know if I'd be literally working. So, Sheldrake gets into like, "You're so popular," and that's kind of suspicious because you're getting all these like glowing recommendations. And like the last employee that was this popular was running like a gambling ring or
Yeah,
something.
that's the vibe I was getting.
Okay.
He I forget exactly the phrase he used, but it definitely seemed like the last person that kept getting these high praises from the mid-level bosses
Hmm.
found out that they were all like a racketeering gambling circle of some
Hmm.
sort.
So obviously, like, yeah, doing something not good. This entire time they're talking, Baxter is still dealing with his cold. Like, he's blowing his nose and, sniffling. And at one point, he's like using nasal spray. And Sheldrake says something like, "We can't be doing things that tarnish the reputation of the company. Like, we have to be upstanding because we're an insurance company. People have to trust us." And he says, "If anything you're doing was to ever leak out," and Baxter yells, "It won't," while squirting his nasal spray. Like, very obviously just like squirting his nasal spray into the air because he gets so worked up. He like leans forward and squirts the bottle.
Yeah, that's a good bit, especially because of the line, leak out, and he just
Mhm.
sprays nasal spray across the office.
Right. His secretary interrupts at this point to say that Sheldrake's wife is on the phone. We overhear him telling her he won't be home for dinner. Turns back to Baxter, asks him if he wants to go see the Music Man. Baxter thinks that Sheldrake is inviting him to be like to go out with him to entertain a client, going to see the Music Man, as if this is part of his, the glowing reviews he's gotten. Like, maybe this is that all coming to fruition. Sheldrake tries to explain that he has other plans, and Baxter is absolutely not catching on.
No,
Um,
he is very confused. He's like, "Oh, I thought
yes.
you were seeing the Music Man." It's like, "No, I have tickets." "Oh, well, aren't you taking so and so?" "No, I have plans." "Well, aren't you seeing
Yeah.
the music?" It's just back and forth. I was like, "Oh my god, just get the light bulb already."
And like, poor Baxter, like, he's so. I feel like he's still so naive despite like what's been going on in his life, because I'm sure part of it too is he's stuck on this speech he was just given about being like moral and upstanding, and because Sheldrick started this very suspicious.
Yeah, I think maybe he was testing the waters on how Baxter could keep a secret because he's like, four
Yeah.
bad apples ruin the barrel no matter what. And he goes off to this like insurance spiel about how that's a small percentage or whatever. So it's just kind of funny because Baxter's still working, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so then when he tells Baxter he doesn't have plans, I was sitting there like, what a freaking hypocrite. And I think he was just testing
Mhm.
the waters to see if it would be okay if he also was in on the game of using this man's apartment.
Mhm.
And when he finally understands, he pulls his key out of his left jacket pocket, but not before like, I don't know, 20 tissues come out.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
holding all the used tissues and his key in his hand.
Just like so gross.
Yeah.
This scene in particular, like with him not getting it, with him like pulling all these used tissues out of his pocket, he just seems so like innocent and naive, to a point that like maybe he shouldn't be at this point. Like it just I
Right.
don't know, because the apartment borrowing has been going on for a while, it seems. But yeah, so he kind of reluctantly hands over his key, especially because he was planning on, going home to sleep tonight, actually using his home and his bed.
And that was
Uh,
after he did all this rearranging.
yes, yeah, and he rearranged everyone's schedules. So when Baxter leaves Sheldrake's office, he overhears a woman in the hall complaining that her date took her to some schnook's apartment. This poor man. But
I love
he
how he gets
then,
to overhear all these things.
I know he really overhears a lot. Although I guess to be fair, it's not like any of these women think that it's him or someone at the office whose apartment they were at. And then every time he's overheard one of the men talk about him, it's been when he's been like hiding on the other
Mm-hmm.
side of his front stoop.
Right.
But he goes back to Fran because he has to take the elevator and invites her to see the Music Man with him. She explains that she has plans with a guy. It used to be serious, but it's not anymore. And she promised this guy she would have a drink with him, but that she could meet Baxter at the theater afterward to go see the Music Man. And Baxter starts explaining that he knows a lot about her because he looked up her card in the group insurance file. And like he just starts listing all these things, like she lives with her sister and her brother-in-law, and like really knows a lot of details about her. And I just felt like I was really rooting for him right up until this. Now
It's a
it
little
got weird.
much. It's a
Yeah.
little much. Pump the brakes. Kind of creeping. Kind of using, your employment database for evil, I guess.
Right. Pretty sure it's illegal when you do it through your work.
Oh, it's 100% illegal. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That shit's supposed to be
Um,
locked away.
right. Well, remember, they're supposed to be upstanding men.
Well,
So we cut to Fran walking into a restaurant to meet with this guy she had mentioned. And it's Sheldrake.
of course it is.
Of course it is. We gather from their conversation that they had dated, kind of like a summer fling, but they split. So again, it's now November. They split at the end of summer, but it seems like he still misses her. I do think she misses him too, wishes she could be with him, but she couldn't handle dating a married man, is kind of how she puts it.
Yeah. Good for her.
Kind of sounds like she had to spend a lot of time working on getting over this breakup, and maybe doesn't love the fact that now she is, back meeting with him, kind of inviting him back in a little bit, even if it is just a drink.
Yeah, she gives a little bit of a spiel here about kind of what she went through this summer and since. And it's, I don't know, we've talked about this before. It kind of reminds me of the Meg Ryan, Drew Barrymore, only the opposite emotion. And
Hmm.
she's going through all this, and, her her lip quivers a little bit, her eyes welled up with tears.
Hmm.
I love this little spotlighting they have on her face while she's in the
Hmm.
restaurant. And then all of his response was like, "How do you think I feel? I had to take the 7:14 train home. Fuck off."
Yeah. 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 He's like, well, how do you think I felt like going back home to my wife? It's like, okay, sir.
Ugh.
Um, yeah, and I like how she rejects him by using her line from work, like, "Full up, have to take the next elevator." Just, like, a really great script. Everyone's very witty and quick. Like,
Oh
I
yeah,
think if I was Fran, I would never have this many quick comebacks.
yeah, she's got some
Uh,
good ones.
yeah. And while this is going on, we cut away to Baxter, like, waiting for her in front of the theater. It's really crowded, like, people are arriving for the show. At the restaurant, Sheldrake is claiming that he was going to get a divorce, and or I'm sorry, we see that Fran is sort of saying, "You always said you were gonna get a divorce, but you were stringing me along," basically, and he says, "Well, that's why I wanted to meet you. I met with a divorce lawyer this morning," but insists that Fran is not the reason he met with a divorce lawyer, I guess maybe to make her feel better, like he would be getting divorced regardless,
That's what I thought. Yeah,
or just trying to hammer home that his, like, marriage is bad or whatever.
yeah. It seems like he was trying to say, "Well, we've been unhappy for a while anyway,
Mhm.
so on the plus side, you and I, it wasn't your
Mhm.
fault, but still."
Yeah. Yeah, so, like, I was gonna get divorced anyway, but it just
Yep.
works out really well for you and me too. So I did wanna point out too, the lighting the whole time on Sheldrake, very noir, like, they're in the back booth of this restaurant, it's already kinda shadowy, but, like, his face in particular is, like he's lit like a noir villain. I don't know how else to put it, and so we get that sense that he's not truthful, that he's playing at something, that he's hiding something.
Yeah, half his face is in shadow. Yeah, both of his eyes are lit and they're very squinty.
Mhm.
It looks like he's hiding something.
And on that note, I did want to point out that Sheldrake is played by Fred McMurray, who is in Double Indemnity, a very famous like example of old Hollywood film noir, which also was directed and written by Billy Wilder. I guess eventually Sheldrake convinces her that like this is legit. He's going to divorce his wife. They could be together. They decide to leave together, but some people from the office have walked in, and one woman in particular notices them walking out together. And I feel like this is Sheldrake's secretary.
I think
Uh,
so.
okay,
Sometimes she's wearing glasses, sometimes she's not. We don't see her enough in the film, and it's so quick. But I'm assuming, because what happens later, it's
because
the secretary.
yeah, same. I didn't clock it as a secretary at first, but then, yes, when everything else unfolds, surprise, surprise, they end up at Baxter's apartment. And then we cut to, again, poor Baxter, still waiting outside the theater for her. And now it's totally empty. He's the only one still out. We assume like the show started and he's still waiting for Fran to show up. After this, we cut to Baxter at work the next day, kind of clearing off his desk. Coworker congratulates him, and we see that he's moving into his own office. So something has actually come of this for once.
Yeah. His coworker gives him a little bit of sass when he's congratulating him, and
Mhm.
also a dollar. They had bet a dollar in a scene previously because
Mhm.
Baxter keeps talking about how everyone's talking good about him. He's moving up the ladder. His efficiency level is through the roof. And the guy to his left, desk to his left, he's like, "Oh, I've been here longer, so I bet you won't get it." He's like, "Oh, gentlemen, bet a dollar." So he like
Yeah.
slams a dollar on the pile of stuff he's carrying with him. He's like, "Congratulate!" He just says it in a way that I don't think he's genuinely happy for him.
Oh no. His coworker is very salty, especially because he doesn't understand why Baxter would get promoted when he's worked there for less time.
Hmm.
But also people assume that stuff matters, I guess. So he's now the second administrative assistant, whatever this means. He gets his own office, but it's like on the same floor and kind of looks out over all those rows of chairs where he used to sit. So it's not private, I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah,
Some of the men who use his apartment come in, start complaining that he isn't letting them use the apartment as much lately, and they call him selfish.
yeah. There's a lot of, "Oh, I could be doing this. You can be doing that. You should be doing this for me." Blah blah blah. And so a lot of quid pro quo is going on here with these guys who might be now all even playing field. I feel like they have similar offices as
Mhm.
Baxter, but maybe still just have a
Yeah.
little more clout. But
Mhm.
they are complaining, like you said, and they're saying they could be doing this if he does that, or if not, they could do this. What an HR nightmare. Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, and so it's like we see Baxter finally getting something out of this arrangement, but they're ready to take it from him at a
Hmm.
moment's notice because they say something like they made him. Like, don't forget, like, we made you. After that, Sheldrake comes in and asks Baxter to make a second key for the apartment because he doesn't want his secretary getting her nose in his business, which might be foreshadowing.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe that's why Baxter's been saying no to these other guys because Sheldrake's been using his apartment more, and Sheldrake outranks these other guys. That much we know.
Yeah, and I feel like the four of them kind of collectively put their good word in to get him here,
Yes.
but it's more, I think, Baxter giving the other key to the higher up.
hmm Baxter then gives Sheldrake a compact mirror that he found left at his apartment. The actual mirror is cracked, but he gives it to Sheldrake, says, I assume this belongs to the woman you were with. Sheldrake takes the mirror from him and says, yeah, she threw it at me. These women just assume you're going to leave your wife. He really minimizes his relationship with Fran, especially after everything we heard him say to her at the restaurant. But again, we,
Yeah,
we knew he was lying.
we knew he was lying. The
Mhm.
film noir lighting told us this.
Yes.
When he is explaining about the situation where she threw the
Mhm.
compact at him and he says all that, he goes, now is that fair? And I love Baxter's little quip of, no sir, especially to your wife.
Yeah. And it just
That,
sails over his head.
yeah.
But we see that it's Christmas time now. So we've been in this world for about like 2 months, maybe.
Hmm.
Uh, just crazy big office Christmas party.
This is the part I'd go to. This is insane.
Also reminds me of Mad Men. So Baxter goes over to the elevators to bring Fran a drink. And we find out it's been about 6 weeks since he asked her out, and they kind of agreed to just let it go. They kind of laugh about it. Obviously, that he is still into her. I do like that when he offers her the drink, she says, I shouldn't drink while I'm driving. And she's referring to the elevators.
Yeah, that was good. But she does kind of place blame on herself, and Baxter does kind of shrug it off. He's like, no, it's no big deal. And she's like, well, you should be mad at me. And he's like, it's whatever. Here's a drink. So
Yeah.
he's trying to make amends because he's,
hmm
like you said, still very into her. And
Yeah.
it doesn't seem they've talked much. Oh, no, they haven't. And he does say, well, I was mad at you. So he kind of
Mhm.
puts it out there, too.
Baxter walks away at some point, and this is when Sheldrake's secretary stops Fran to let her know that she saw them at the restaurant when
Hmm.
they were leaving the restaurant together, that she had had an affair with Sheldrake as well a little while back, and he gave her the same speech about divorcing his wife. So Fran is pretty shaken up by this, both I think knowing that she's been outed, but also that Sheldrake apparently has done this with multiple women,
Yeah, she
including
has a
her and her.
list. She names a bunch of women.
Yes. At this point, Baxter comes back and wants to take Fran to see his office, and he's very excited, and he's, like, really not reading the room here because I feel like Fran's just really shaken and quiet, and he's just like, "Oh my god, come see my new office and see this new hat I bought."
Yeah. Do you like my new hat?
Yeah. So basically takes her into his office, and he's, like, showing her this it's a bowler hat, right? That's what they
Hmm.
call it. Oh, and when they first walk into the office, 2 people are using his office to make out. So it's like this
Yeah.
poor man just can't catch a break.
Yeah.
So he has to kick them out. But he wants to show her his new hat. And for some reason, while they're in there, he starts showing her Christmas cards he's gotten. And he's like, oh, I got one from Sheldrake. And Fran sees the picture of Sheldrake with his wife and their 2 kids, very much looking like a perfect, like, upper class family.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, he shows her as proof that they are close, him and Sheldrick. He
oh,
says,
yes,
oh,
he's
you
kind
don't
of
have to.
bragging.
Well, he was trying to advance her career. He's like, well, I know top people. Like, you don't have to, you can do other things. You don't have to just be
Mhm.
an elevator operator. And he's
Right,
like, I know
that's
somebody.
true.
Look at this. And
Mhm.
she just, that's when she like, is already feeling downtrodden. And she's just getting lower and lower at this point because now, like you said, there's the picture of the perfect family
Yep.
and she just heard that he has done the song and dance about leaving his wife before to other women.
Right. Yes. I think also part of it is that she's worried about, like, being a part of the office Christmas party when she's, like, I guess maybe, like, working with the elevators is a different area.
Yeah, she's not part of the
Do you know what
office.
I
She's just
mean?
part of
Like,
the
she's
building.
not part of
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And he's trying to be like, "No, no, I know people." Getting back to this hat, he's like, "Should I wear it like this? Should I wear it to the side? Whatever." And Fran's like, "Well, here, see how you look." Passes him her compact mirror. He opens it and sees that it is the same broken mirror that he had just given back to Sheldrake.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's shocked, but all he says is, "Oh, your mirror's broken." And she says, "Yeah, I like it that way. Makes me look how I feel."
I feel like that's how he feels now too.
Yeah. So, yes, Baxter realizes that Fran is the woman that Sheldrake's been bringing to his apartment this whole time. And after their discussion in his office, Sheldrake lets Baxter know that he'll be using the apartment again tonight. And now Baxter specifically knows that means Fran will be at his apartment.
Yeah. He walks out of the party, and one of the four higher ups that's been using his apartment's like, "Oh, I need to use it tonight." He's like, "You can't." He's like, "What about tomorrow at 4?" Which is like, this is the Christmas party, and this is back when Christmas parties were Christmas Eve.
Hmm.
And so tomorrow is Christmas, and he's trying to come over on Christmas to use his apartment. And
Right.
Baxter doesn't really say yes or no. He just kind of shrugs him off and walks away. And it's the rows, I should say, just the
Hmm.
constant, endless rows of all these desks as he's walking through with his head
Hmm.
down, just also depresses me. Not just for
Yes.
Baxter, just the shot is so.
There's so many desks. It feels very dystopian,
Mhm.
even though it's just an office building. Like, I'm sure this is what they look like.
That bothers me for some reason.
Yeah, I know. So we cut to Baxter drowning his sorrows at a bar because, as usual, he cannot go home. Some woman starts talking to him about Havana and his opinion on Castro.
Well, I think she sees him by himself. He's like the only one by himself besides her. And she
Okay.
starts tearing straw wrappers. She starts
Hmm.
tearing the tops off it and blowing the rest of
Hmm.
it to get his attention. And he hits him a few times in the face, and he just does not notice.
Yeah.
So then she just pops on over. And I
Hmm.
think she starts the conversation with saying, "Do you like Castro?"
Does she sound like that?
I think so, yeah. Every woman has this weird pseudo Bronxy 1960s voice.
Yeah, she wants to know if he likes Castro because her husband is in jail in Havana, and I guess she's been trying to contact Fidel Castro to
Personally.
to let him know that her husband should get out. I think she's asking Baxter if he has anyone to spend Christmas with, and he says no, and she kind of insinuates that they should spend time together because she hates walking into an empty apartment on Christmas Eve. He says, "I said I had no family. I didn't say I had an empty apartment."
Yeah, that's why he's at the bar.
Hmm. So we cut to Sheldrake and Fran at Baxter's apartment, and he's explaining why he cannot actually divorce his wife now. And he's, I don't know, giving her what I assume are all the usual, like, asshole married men excuses.
Right.
He's like, it's the holidays and the kids are home, and like, and he kind of is telling her like she should just cheer up because they're together. It's Christmas Eve, and she says, "That's me, a happy idiot," and she's very despondent when she says it. But he's like, "That's more like it."
Jesus.
Yeah, I know. She's still crying and upset, and I think she brings up maybe what the secretary had told her too, because Sheldrake
Yeah.
says something like he went around with all these women because he was unhappy at home and he was lonely, but Fran is the last of the women for him, he swears. And she just says, "When you're in love with a married man, you shouldn't wear mascara." She gives him a record as a Christmas gift, and he forgot to get her a Christmas gift. He just probably didn't even think of it.
He says that he didn't want to buy her a gift. He didn't want prying eyes to see he's buying a gift that wasn't for his wife. So he gives
Mm.
her money instead,
He gives her $100 bill and
which
says, "Go
is,
buy something for yourself."
yeah, it's Baxter's week's allowance.
Right?
Well, maybe he's different now. He's got his bigger boy job.
But after this kind of awkward exchange, he's like, "Well, I have to get home and trim the tree." And right as he said that, I was like, yeah, he made this whole big thing about how he can't divorce his wife now because it's the holidays and the kids and whatever, and he's spending time with his mistress on Christmas Eve, so it's like, okay, obviously you don't care that much, sir. I was wondering why his family wouldn't be suspicious about him being away on Christmas Eve too.
Yeah, we don't really hear much about his family. It just he uses it as leverage to not be
Mhm.
with Fran.
Right, to not commit to Fran anyway. Yeah, Sheldrake sucks, that's about what it is. Fran insinuates that he is treating her like a prostitute due to him giving her the cash and, they
Mhm.
just meet up like this. They're not actually together. They don't go out together or anything. And she acknowledges that he has to be paying someone to use this apartment, indicating that he
Yeah.
should just take the cash and use it for that. He insists that he loves her and their relationship won't always be like this, goes to kiss her goodbye, and she reminds him that he can't get caught with lipstick on himself. So he leaves. She stays behind, puts on the record she bought him, and just cries. Goes to the bathroom to kind of clean herself up, and she finds sleeping pills in Baxter's bathroom.
Yeah, the reveal of that shot is pretty cool because
Mhm.
she's cleaning herself up in the sink. And you don't see her; you just see. And it's one of those mirrors that attach via little metal arm, so you can move it around.
Mhm.
It's a shaving mirror, essentially, is what that is. And
Mhm.
it's up in a way where you see the pills in the background. And the pills have been mentioned before. Baxter, when he was on the phone with Dobich, when he was in bed, one of his reasonings for not leaving is, "I just took a sleeping pill. So
Oh, yeah.
I'm tired. I need to go to sleep." Yeah, I mean, this probably happens a lot where he can't get to his apartment on time. So to,
Mhm.
I don't know, speed up the process of going to sleep so he can go back to work and be very efficient, I'm sure he takes a sleeping pill. Sure,
Mhm.
fine. Now we see those pills in the mirror, and we don't even see her. We just see the mirror. We see him in the back, and we see her hand grab it, and it's a cool little. The camera doesn't move, but her hand does in a way where you don't even
Mhm.
see it move at all, and she brings it into focus.
Yeah, it's a nicely choreographed scene and a way to highlight the sleeping pills without having her turn around and have a literal
Hmm.
spotlight on them. So then we cut back to Baxter dancing with this woman he met at the bar. I love how they're dancing. They're just like leaning on each other's faces
Yeah,
and
they're
like
probably drunk.
R yes, definitely, but also you get the impression too that they're, like, not really into each other because they 'cause they're just, like, leaning on each other like, "Well, you're just this person that I have
Yeah.
for right now." I don't even think it's full body contact, you know what I mean?
Oh, it's they're just like their side
They're
of each other's face is leaning on the other side of each other's
Yes,
face,
yes.
and they're just kind of shuffling back and forth.
Mhm. Well, they get kicked out of the bar because it's closing time, and she asks if they should go to his place or hers, and he says, "Might as well go to mine, everyone else does."
Oh boy, poor Baxter.
Yep. I can't remember how this conversation starts about Fran. I think she's asking Baxter if he has a girl, and he says, or a girlfriend, and he says, "Well, there is a girl, but she's no friend of mine," because he's just so
Hmm.
angry about everything with Fran. Angry now that he's realized that she's with Sheldrake, picked Sheldrake over him in a sense. I like that he mentions to this random woman that he promised his body to Columbia Medical Center because his doctor neighbor had been like, "Please let us study your body because you party so hard." They come into his apartment. He finds the record still in the player.
Well, he starts playing the music,
Mhm.
and again, he's probably a little inebriated. And
Mhm.
Jack Lemon's little dance around the apartment was very entertaining to me. They're very awkward moves, but yet somehow very graceful.
Yeah.
And it was just a fun little scene before things get really serious.
Yeah. So while he's moving around the apartment, he starts noticing like all these women's belongings lying around. Eventually, he goes into his bedroom, finds Fran laying on his bed, and he thinks she's just sleeping. And he's kind of starts talking to her like, "I used to like you a lot, but it's all over between us." And then eventually realizes that nothing he's doing or saying is like actually waking her up. Realizes she took his sleeping pills. I think he finds the empty bottle. He immediately runs to get his neighbor, the doctor, and he never says anything to the girl he brought home. He's just, like, running in and out of the apartment.
Yeah, I like a lot of the lines in this movie. That's kind of why I like these older movies.
Mhm,
When he's yelling at Fran, he's like, "You gotta leave. I gotta guess. You gotta get OUT out," which is what the bartender just told them 5 minutes ago.
mhm.
So again, a lot of repeat of lines.
Mhm.
And the only thing this other woman says, she goes in to get ice. That's when he's dancing, and that's when he goes to the bedroom and sees Fran, and she's complaining about the refrigerator being dangerous or broken or something. She's like, "You need to get a new refrigerator." And
Mhm.
as she says that, he sprints out to go with the doctor. She's like, "Why do you mean right now?"
Yeah,
I thought that was funny, but also it shows how he's obviously more concerned about Fran ODing, which rightfully so,
rightfully so,
but
yeah.
doesn't say anything to this other woman who's just
Mhm.
confused.
He does not care about this woman, which is fine, I guess. He tells the doctor there's someone in his apartment that needs help and then comes back into his apartment to, like, throw this woman out.
Again, without telling her why, because I guess I
Mhm.
probably wouldn't tell her why either.
Yeah, he's just like, "You have to leave, you have to leave."
Yeah, and she gets so mad. She's like, "Oh, you're treating me so poorly. I'm gonna call my husband. He's gonna punch you in the face or something like that." But she's basically like saying, "I'm gonna tell on you to my
Yeah,
husband, who's being, held prisoner by Castro."
right. And she's like, "I'm gonna have my husband, like, punch out my potential affair partner for not having an affair with me."
What the fuck?
She's very offended. But doctor comes over, gets Fran to throw up the pills. We kinda go through this whole scene of him, like, doing whatever he has to do to, like, get the pills out of her system. He's also, like, trying to get her up and walking. He injects her with something. Baxter, while this is going on, notices a letter on his nightstand that we assume Fran left. He pockets that.
Yeah.
I do like the close up of Baxter trying to explain to the doctor what had happened. He's trying to cover for Fran and insinuate that, like, this is his girlfriend or at least a girl he was seeing, and they had a fight, and then she did this. Like, this, he's trying to cover for her. I do think he's still trying to cover for Sheldrake because he doesn't want to get in trouble at work either. But it's this close up of him trying to spin this story, and he's terrified and he's sweating. And you can tell that he's just so out of his element and maybe is realizing this has gotten completely out of hand.
I also feel like besides protecting Fran, which does seem to be the biggest cause of concern for
Mhm.
Baxter because he likes her. But I think part of it too is maybe getting in trouble with his landlord. Like, why doesn't he just say, someone was here when I got here as a friend? He could easily just say he had a friend over, but because it's a
Mhm.
constant thing, I feel like he's covering up to also cover his own ass, both at work and
It
at
could be.
home. There's a lot at stake here.
Mhm, right. Yeah, because we do see him say something to the doctor like, "Well, you're not gonna report this, are you?" Like, he doesn't even want it, like, getting out that Fran did this, like, for her sake. We see that they basically have her, like, marching through the apartment to, like, try to stay awake, and he, like, is having her drink coffee like it's medicine. I guess I don't know what the protocol is if someone ODs on sleeping pills. I understand the inducing vomiting. I didn't realize coffee was gonna be such a big part of it.
I guess you don't want the victim to go back to sleep right
Yeah.
away. You
Mhm.
assume that the worst. So they do this all night, and I think the next morning they're all exhausted, and the doctor
Mhm.
lets her go back to sleep to get rest now
Mhm.
because she
Yeah.
was OD'd or was
Mhm.
ODing, and he asks if there's more coffee left, and he says how he would he ought to kick his ass
Mhm.
because of what he let this girl do.
Yeah,
Again,
'cause
because of the story that they had a fight. Baxter went out, got that woman, and she was upset.
yeah, so the doctor thinks Baxter's just this, like, cad who treats women horribly.
Right. And the doctor is sitting there while Baxter serves some coffee, and there's like an open container of who knows, whiskey, maybe. It's hard to
Mhm.
tell. It's a black and white film. But he asked if he could cool his coffee down, and Baxter says, of course. So he pours a little bit of, let's call it
Mhm.
brandy, into his coffee, which I think also cools him down because he just threatened Baxter.
Mhm.
So after the doctor leaves, the landlady shows up right away, or I think Baxter's leaving to go get something,
Mhm.
and they see each other in the hallway, and she hears all the marching. She yells at him for having a party, keep her up all night, and she's
Mhm.
like, "Oh, what's all this marching? Are you doing any army exercises?" And I didn't realize that the landlady I knew she lived in the building, but not directly under. It seems the
Yeah,
Baxter, and he's having all these people over all the time, having parties and staying up late and going in and out of the apartment at God knows what time.
right.
A little risky
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
It's bad enough she lives in the building, but you're doing this directly above her. It's crazy.
mhm. I had the same thought, like, his apartment is not in a good physical position for him to be doing this.
Right.
At this point, the doctor is left. Baxter calls Sheldrake at home to explain what happened to Fran. It's Christmas Day. He assumes that Sheldrake would want to come be with her, and Sheldrake's like, "No, that's impossible. It's Christmas. I'm with my family." He really has no concern for Fran, which I think we expected. Baxter makes sure to tell Sheldrake that he hid the letters she left to him and that the doctor that treated her was a friend. Nothing's going to leak out to the press. There's not going to be a police report. But the doctor had made a comment that people who attempt suicide often attempt it again, I think within a relatively short amount of time. And so Baxter is like very concerned by this to the point where I feel like he's just waiting for her to do something. He's extremely worried about her, trying to, I think, get the severity of this across to Sheldrake, and Sheldrake just doesn't care. Fran wakes up at this point, overhears some of this conversation, and we hear Baxter saying, "Well, isn't there some sort of message that you want me to give to her?" And then says, "Okay, yeah, like I'll think of something." So we can assume that Sheldrake really, like I said, didn't care. Such a bad boyfriend. We had talked about, the bad boyfriend trope a little bit, and it's like he's the worst. This is the worst bad boyfriend. There's much more serious consequences in this one.
Well, yeah, besides the not caring that your mistress is
Like almost
basically
died.
dead or
Mhm. Yeah.
tried to kill herself because of you.
Mhm.
He's also married.
Yep.
Can't be much more of a bad boyfriend than that.
Exactly, yes. I do like this little bit where Baxter's like trying to think of all the potentially dangerous things in his apartment, his bathroom specifically. We see him take his razor out of its holder, and I think he like pockets it, like he's really trying to hide everything from her. He stops Fran from checking in with her sister because he says she doesn't have a good enough cover story. And he reminds her that they have to protect Sheldrake. Sometimes I feel like he's showing more concern for protecting Sheldrake than protecting like Fran's reputation, which I do think is part of it for him. But maybe like we had said before, he's just worried about his job too.
Yeah, the fallout because
Hmm.
they would point the fingers at him.
Right. The doctor's wife comes by with soup for Fran, and she's really, doting, like taking very good care of Fran specifically, and is like while kind of shooting looks at Baxter and making comments because like he's the jerk that like got her into this situation as far as they know.
She asked him if he has napkins. And I didn't realize it's such a big thing. It's like, you have napkins? It's like, I
Yeah.
have paper towels. Beatnik.
Yeah.
It was so random. But then he runs to the doctor's apartment and gets her napkins out of her drawer.
Nothing Baxter does in their mind is like proper or well mannered or anything.
No.
After the doctor's wife leaves, Fran does mention the envelope. Well, first, I'm sorry, she apologizes to Baxter. And like for the whole mix up, people thinking that Fran is his girlfriend, whatever, because that's their cover story. And Baxter says, "No, it's flattering that people think you would be with me." And she mentions the envelope that he had pocketed. It is not a suicide note, it's the $100 that Sheldrake gave her. I don't think she explains this to Baxter. She just says, like, "Give this back to Sheldrake." Fran kind of mentions, like, this isn't the best way to spend Christmas. And he says, he's used to spending Christmas alone, that sort of thing. And I guess like he has no family. That's what I gathered mostly from this discussion.
It seems like that, yeah.
It seems like he's alone a lot. And I mean, we saw in the beginning, like he's just doing a frozen dinner for his meals, kind of like Lonely Bachelor vibes, I guess. He also says last Christmas he had to clean up after another guy who had people over. So we assume then that he's been lending out his apartment for at least a year.
At least, yeah.
Mhm.
You mentioned you went to the zoo instead, and I was kind of baffled that the zoo would be open on Christmas. Maybe he
It's
slept there.
We get a little bit of Fran's backstory. She's from Pittsburgh. She apparently had a really crappy boyfriend before she got with Sheldrake, who got sent to jail for embezzlement. And he was like, "Oh, wait for me. I'll be out in like this many years." And she's like, "Nah, I'm gonna go to New York."
Bye.
Bye. Moved in with her sister and brother-in-law. They helped her go through secretarial school, but she failed the typing test because she can't spell. So then she got put on elevator duty and met Sheldrake. And that's how we got here. I do like this next little part where one of the guys from the office shows up with his date for his designated time at the apartment.
It's 4 o'clock, 4 p.m. Christmas romp.
Right. Baxter is still there with Fran. As Baxter is trying to explain to this guy that like he can't use the apartment, he needs to leave. He's like trying to shove him out the door. This guy spots Fran in Baxter's bed and obviously gets the wrong idea.
Yeah, it seems to be okay to not use his apartment because he has a lady there, but not okay if Baxter just wants to be in his own apartment.
Yeah. Yeah, like the guy totally understands and leaves, and I think he even like gives him his champagne.
Yeah, and he even just tells the woman he's with to like chill out, like we can go somewhere else. I do want to say that, and this has happened more in this movie, but for some reason, this scene, I think he says it a lot. Him and Dobich, they say buddy
Mhm.
boy to him a lot. It's so annoying to me. It's clearly
Yeah.
they're talking down to him
Oh, yeah.
because he's not an equal. I mean, hence
Exactly.
the term boy in that buddy boy.
Mhm.
But he says it a lot in this scene, or maybe I just was done hearing this. I'm just like, I hate this.
Yeah.
This is annoying.
Yeah. It's definitely condescending. The next time he and Fran are talking, she says something like, "Why can't I ever fall in love with someone nice like you?" And he says, "That's the way it crumbles, cookie wise." It's just a
Yeah.
very famous line from this movie.
And so he goes back to shaving, and surprise, nothing's happening because he took the razor out.
Mhm.
And I think it's a funny bit. I wish it was done a little differently because it's a little dark in this scene, and the light's on the wrong side of his face. And when he goes to
Mm.
shave, you don't see the stubble underneath. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. It's kind of
Mhm.
in shadow. But then Jack Lemmon kind of plays it up and starts feeling on his face, and oh, forgot. And he goes in his pocket and gets the razor.
Yeah.
I just wish there was more of a sight joke before that,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
I get that.
I'm nitpicking.
So we cut to, well, some people are back in the office after Christmas. I don't think Fran and Baxter are back in the office. Apparently, they go back to the office like the day after Christmas. That's kind of what it seems like. Sheldrake fires his secretary because she outed all his affairs to Fran. He calls Baxter, and the secretary is pissed, so she listens in on the phone call. Baxter asks him again to come visit Fran. Baxter tells Fran to come to the phone, talk to Sheldrake because he's not going to come visit. He leaves the apartment so they could talk privately. But all Sheldrake does is berate her and calls her childish and that he should be so mad, but he'll just forget the whole thing, pretend it never happened, like forgive her. And Fran says something like, "Of course, I'm not here because the whole thing never happened, never even met." And I feel like Fran is still just like in her spiral.
Yeah, it's. I mean, she's agreeing with him. He hears that, but he's not listening to what she's saying.
At this point, the now fired secretary calls Sheldrake's wife and arranges to meet up with her for lunch.
It's about damn time.
Yeah, Baxter comes back to his apartment with groceries. His landlady stops him to tell him that she smelled gas coming from his apartment. He's frantic, thinking, like, this is it. Fran tried to kill herself again, just like the doctor warned. Turns out she just doesn't know how to use his burner.
That was kind of weird. I get
Yeah.
where they were going with the gas, but then
Hmm.
the explanation kind of fell flat to
Yeah.
me.
She also mentions, after they've calmed down, that she found a drawer with a bunch of women's stuff in there. And he's still not coming clean about lending out his apartment, even though, like, she obviously knows now because she
Clearly
woke up
knows.
and he was like, she woke up after the suicide attempt and he was there. Yeah. But I think he's still trying to just protect everyone.
At this point, I don't get it.
Same. Yeah. I just want Baxter to like burn the whole thing down at this point. Like, come on, dude. Like, get angry.
Right. That's why I
um,
really like the secretary. Even though we don't see her much, she definitely, I
yeah.
feel, is the voice of the audience.
Right. Yes. We learned that Baxter is from Cincinnati and almost shot himself because he was in love with his best friend's wife and he just like knew he could never be with her. Couldn't go through with shooting himself and then got startled and accidentally shot himself in the leg.
Classic.
I do like when he offers to show her the scar in his leg and she's like, "Nah, fellas in the office might get the wrong idea about how I found out." And this is a callback to earlier when, he's explaining he looked through her file and knows she had her appendix out. And she says, "Well, just don't tell anyone in the office because they might get the wrong idea about how you found out."
Both ideas are the wrong idea.
Yeah, I know, which is also ironic now that we find out she was having an affair with someone in the office. We see Fran's brother show up to the office. He's looking for her. For some reason, he's sent right to like Baxter's office.
It's Fran's brother in law.
Hmm.
and he's in the lobby and he asks about her, and the woman working the floor who shakes a cowbell at people to go into the elevator. That was weird, right?
Yeah, it's like,
Basically tells him to go to like office management, like this person oversees the employees is kind of what
hmm
I got out of that. And of course it's one of the four former Baxter apartment users, and
yes,
so they're salty as shit, so they're definitely setting up this would be confrontation. They think that this guy's gonna beat up.
go beat up Baxter. Yeah.
Well, because now I think the rumor is starting to spread that Kirkaby or whatever his name is, the guy that came with the champagne at 4 o'clock on Christmas, he saw Fran. So you know they're
Everybody
talking. You
knows.
know
Yeah.
everybody knows.
Um,
Ungrateful bastards.
the brother-in-law, shows up to Baxter's apartment as they're about to sit down for dinner. They've made this really nice, like, spaghetti dinner. Obviously, the brother-in-law is like, what the hell? Like, he thinks that she's like shacking up with this guy. And I like when she leaves to get her things, Baxter looks like he's about to like get rough with the brother-in-law. Like he's kind of squaring up and then just looking really rough, like fists are kind of up, and then he just goes, would you like a martini? In this like really friendly voice. Like it totally, like that whole facade crumbles and he offers him a martini. While this is all going on, the doctor comes by to check on Fran. That's the whole story out of the bag, that she had tried to kill herself. Baxter claims that Fran took the pills because of him, because he had hurt her, still protecting Sheldrake over all of this. But also, I think
I feel
he's
like now at this point, he just is afraid to get caught in a lie. I,
maybe.
it just seems like it's bigger than him now, and one false step and everything crumbles.
I do still think he's trying to protect Fran's reputation, because like it would probably be more scandalous that she was with a married man than a bachelor like him. Brother-in-law reacts by punching Baxter, kind of
There's a little
understandably given this.
two-piece combo. Boom, boom.
Fran is horrified because like she knows Baxter's a good guy. She kisses Baxter and leaves. The doctor leans down and says Baxter had it coming.
He does. I don't mean to tell you I told you so, but you had it
Yeah.
coming. The shot fades and bloody lip, black eyed Baxter
hmm
slumped on his table. He broke something on his fall, and
hmm
he is probably it's the happiest smile we see in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, like the
He,
most genuine smile.
yeah, I
hmm
do like the spaghetti making scene because he's clearly a bachelor, and Fran makes fun of him, and she asks if he plays tennis, and he says, "No, that's how I strain my spaghetti."
Yeah, I did like that. They were
And
straining it
then
with the racket.
we see all of this happen too, and he makes a joke about serving meatballs.
So finally, Baxter is back at work. We see him rehearsing a speech he's going to give to Sheldrake. He's going to tell Sheldrake that he will take Fran off his hands because Baxter loves her, genuinely wants to be with her, while Sheldrake does not. He's trying to frame it as he's doing Sheldrake a favor, like he's solving his problem. I couldn't help thinking about that part in Aladdin where the Sultan and Aladdin are talking about, like, oh, I'll take the princess off your hands, I'll marry her. And Jasmine's like, what the heck? Do I get a say in this?
I can totally see that.
The guys who ratted Baxter out see him walking around the office wearing sunglasses. He's hiding the black eye he got from being punched by the brother in law. They're very happy about this because they're the ones who sent the brother in law to kind of get him in trouble. Never mind all the stuff this man has done for them, but whatever.
Ungrateful bastards.
Yeah, absolutely. Baxter spent so much money for them to have their affairs. And they're just like,
Right.
they're like, let's go get him punched. Like, that's pretty much
Yeah.
what it is. When he gets to Sheldrake's office, turns out Sheldrake has the same speech prepared. Like, I'm going to take Fran off your hands. Like, you don't have to take care of her anymore because, surprise, he finally left his wife.
Did
Because
he
then
leave his wife, or
well, it turns out his secretary told his wife all about the affair, so she kicked him out.
yeah, he says that he fired his secretary. She told the wife fired me. Ain't that a kick in the head?
Yeah.
I do like the line that my wife fired me, though.
Yeah.
That was good.
He rewards Baxter for taking care of Fran and like hiding this whole story. So he gives him a nicer, more private office, and he's bumped up to assistant director. Baxter is at the executive level now. He gets like all these perks, like they mention a key to the executive washroom, but it's definitely a more private office. It's on the same floor as Sheldrake, I believe. Baxter says something like a woman like Fran deserves to be married, kind of like questioning Sheldrake's intentions,
Hmm.
but also like kind of old fashioned, but okay. Like she's a great girl. She deserves a marriage. Sheldrake's like, yeah, but he has to like settle his divorce. He has to go to Reno, which I think is like one of the only places you could get like a no fault divorce at the time. Because they also did this in Mad Men. They had to fly
Yeah.
to Reno to get their divorce.
Was Mad
Um,
Men just like based on this movie?
Mad Men was a darker version of The Apartment.
I fair.
Sheldrake is in really no hurry to commit to Fran, really.
He's trying to enjoy his time as a bachelor now,
Mhm.
which probably means even more women.
After this conversation, Baxter runs into Fran. He's wearing his sunglasses still. He tells her that he was actually using Sheldrake instead of it being the other way around. He's trying to convince himself and her, like, spin this story like he was just using everyone to get ahead at work instead of being taken advantage of. And he's using his new position as like proof that he was using
Yeah,
everyone.
I feel like that's not entirely untrue. I don't know if Baxter is a mastermind enough to pull that off. I think he did all this with the four original guys to kind of make friends of the office and play nice and we're going to put a good word in. So he did want to move up the ladder, and then the boss found out and he gave him his own key, and then he got all these perks. So yeah, it is what he says it is, but not exactly. He didn't really orchestrate it personally.
I'm sure he hoped that would come through. But yeah,
Sure.
it's not, I don't think he was this mastermind that was actually planning this. He's obviously trying to save face in front of Fran, trying to seem like he's okay with everything, especially because Fran, while she claims she is not going to see Sheldrake until after the divorce is settled, she is still going to keep seeing Sheldrake.
Yeah, she seems most happy she's been since the beginning of the movie. Baxter is putting on a facade about, I orchestrated all this. It was all part of my master plan. I'm
Yeah,
got
like
the
I'm
keys to the
fine.
kingdom, and I don't need you. I'm
Hmm.
cool. I'm cool with you going back to the other guy.
Yep. And he even points out a woman waiting in the lobby and says, like, he has a date with her that night. I really like how they set this up. The scene ends with, Fran leaving for the night. She completely leaves the lobby. We see Baxter walking toward that woman who he has a date with. As he is walking toward her, we see a guy puts his arm around her and they walk out. Baxter continues walking in that direction, just goes to like a newspaper stand behind her.
It does look like she's approaching him as he's approaching the newspaper stand.
It was a very good fake out. Basically, where we are is that Baxter is still lonely and work is going well, arguably, but that's about it.
Don't even know what he does anymore. He
I,
just keeps moving up.
yeah, he gets offices. That's his job. Back at work, Sheldrake is explaining to Baxter he's taking Fran out for New Year's Eve, wants to use Baxter's apartment. It struck me that it is New Year's Eve, like they're working on New Year's Eve, because
Yeah,
the way Sheldrake starts this conversation is like, well, don't you have plans tonight? He needs Baxter's personal key because he got rid of the copy after all the stuff happened with Fran. He like threw the copy of the key out the window or something. Baxter tells him no. He's trying to stand firm and be like, no one's using my apartment anymore. Or at least this guy who's with the girl I like is not using my apartment anymore. Sheldrake threatens his job and Baxter turns over the key.
he has to use Baxter's apartment because where he's staying, I forget where. He's not at home anymore yet. He got fired by
He
his
says
wife.
he's in like at the athletic club.
Yes, it's basically, I'm assuming, like YMCA,
That's
but
kind of what I
apparently
thought.
they have a no female visitor rule. I guess that's what he
Hmm.
kind of tells Baxter. So he demands a key. Baxter says no, and I love when he finally gives because he doesn't want to lose his new cushy job.
Hmm.
He goes to his jacket pocket and there's a pause as he's going over it in his head. I'm sitting there. I know they're not going to do it in 1960, but I was really hoping when he slowly pulled his right hand out, he would just give the bird.
Yep.
And I just felt it in my soul. I was like, come on, do it. Be the
Yeah, like
first middle
tell him
finger on
off. Come
film.
on. Be the first middle finger on film. Yeah.
Which
Yeah,
I don't even know if that
that's
would be true or not, but that's not the point.
who knows.
It felt like he was going to do it too. I really did. And then he
It's
just gave the key. I was like, oh,
it's like I said, this whole movie I'm like waiting for Baxter to get angry.
right.
Like burn it down. But like also I get it. He needs a paycheck. Like totally get that. But then we see Baxter goes back into his office, dejected. Sheldrake pops in. He's like, hey, you gave me the wrong key. This is the key to the executive washroom. And it turns out Baxter gave him the correct key because Baxter is quitting.
There you go, Baxter.
There you go. I do like that he gives his bowler hat to the janitor on his way out, just like a nice callback to like,
Hmm.
I have this fancy new job, so I got this fancy new hat to go with it, and puts the hat on the janitor's head on the way out. We cut to Baxter packing up his apartment, which I was a little surprised at. I guess I forgot that, I don't know, in addition to quitting his job, he's like, I can't even be in this apartment anymore. The doctor stops by because he needs ice for his New Year's Eve party. Baxter offers to pay the doctor for taking care of Fran. And the doctor says, no, I didn't do that as a doctor. I did it as a neighbor. And I like this little contrast of like, you don't owe me anything. There's no quid pro quo between us taking care of each other. And it's like obviously in such a contrast to what he's been going through with everyone at work.
And it's also a callback from when he took care of Fran,
Mhm.
and he said he has to report it as a suicide attempt. And he said, well, did you come over as a doctor or as a neighbor? When Baxter is cleaning up his apartment and packing, he goes to the mantle and he pulls out a pistol.
Yeah.
And so I felt that that story might have been maybe fake to make Fran feel better. And I thought he'd offer to show a scar, but she rejected that idea. But
Yeah.
like then he pulls a gun out. I was like, oh shit, that's
Hmm.
he really was going to shoot himself. And also, is he going to do that now?
Yeah.
I mean, he
Yes.
lost his job. He's moving out of his apartment. Who knows?
I kind of forgot that they show us the gun. So we see Fran at a New Year's Eve party with Sheldrake. They're at the same back booth at the same restaurant. He tells her he was able to find a rental car so that they could drive down to Atlantic City to stay there because basically he has nowhere else to take her because he doesn't have access to Baxter's apartment. He got kicked out of his own house. He's not allowed to take her back to the athletic club. And she says something like, "But that's so far." And like again, I mean, it's New Year's Eve in New York City, so like there probably weren't open hotel rooms, but like generally though, none of you have heard of hotels.
He also says he's got a car coming to get them at 1 a.m. You want to talk about being in pajamas at 11 p.m.? Sir,
Yep.
sir, come on.
Sir. Well, and then he blames all of this on Baxter. He like
Of course. Yeah.
he verbalizes it, says this is all Baxter's fault because he wouldn't give me the key to his apartment. I did so much for him and he couldn't even do this for me. And then on top of it, it was specifically that he didn't want him to bring Fran there. And he says, "What's he got against you, anyways?" And Fran says, "I don't know. I guess that's the way it crumbles, cookie wise."
Or he
That's what
asked,
I
like,
have.
what does that what does that mean? Because
Hmm.
the cookie crumble line.
Hmm.
And she says she'd spell it out for you, only she can't spell.
Yeah.
And that's why one of the reasons why she couldn't be a secretary. She mentioned that
Yeah, she
she has
failed
a
her
hard time
test.
spelling. Yeah.
I really like this scene. You can tell Fran's wheels are turning. She realizes that Baxter must really like her, that that's kind of what's going on. Sheldrake turns around in the booth, and when he turns back to look at Fran, there's just an empty chair. And
Yeah.
so she's ditched him on New Year's Eve.
Yeah, I think it's the balls dropping or something's going on in the
Or
front.
just did,
I think
maybe.
the piano guy that they like, the
Hmm.
musical artist, he's doing a number, but like everyone's
Hmm.
facing him. So because his back is naturally to the door every time he's in that restaurant, he turns
Hmm.
around
Hmm.
and it actually cuts away. It's like a weird angle to whatever is happening that he's looking at. It's just the
Hmm.
camera going to his eyesight. He comes
Hmm.
back and he's in the booth, and it's only half the booth because he's still facing forward. And he turns, and Fran's gone.
Yeah.
And just another good reveal shot, like you said.
Yeah. And for me personally, I'm like, thank God, Fran. Like, finally.
It's about damn time.
About damn time. So we see Fran running to Baxter's apartment. Immediately she hears this loud bang and she frantically like goes up the stairs, starts screaming for him, pounding on the door. He opens the door and he's holding like this open bottle of champagne. Fran has assumed he has shot himself given that whole pistol story.
And I think the audience might have thought that because they just showed the gun.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
A
what
little gun
I didn't
fake
think
out.
that, but that's what I thought we were supposed to think with the
Yes.
setup. I was mad that he opens the door and he has the open bottle of champagne, and he clearly opened it incorrectly because it is
It's
cascading
just
out of the
going,
bottle.
yeah. Mhm.
And what a waste.
They both mention that they're on their own. He says, "What about Sheldrake?" And she says she'll send him a fruitcake every Christmas, which is a callback to the woman that Baxter accidentally shot himself over.
Yeah.
That she just sends him a fruitcake every Christmas now. Like, there's nothing between them. They sit on the couch together, they're going to play cards, and Baxter turns to her and says that he loves her, he absolutely adores her. And she just says, "Shut up and deal." And that's it. Anything else you want to say about the ending, or you're good?
I don't think there's anything else to say.
No, it's okay.
If I say anything, I guess it would be your point to the wedding singer is you kind of want to know what happens here. Like after the
Yeah.
fact. Like,
Mhm.
who won the gin rummy game? I don't know.
Yeah, that's my one pet peeve is like you spend all this time with these people, you want to see them actually be happy together, but again, that's like not interesting, I guess. My one other note, well, I was logging the apartment on Letterboxd because I use Letterboxd. In the synopsis on Letterboxd for the apartment, it says that the character's name is Bud Baxter, and
Sure.
he very clearly says in the beginning that his name is CC Baxter, and he explains like what CC stands for.
Hmm.
And I was like, did someone make this mistake because everyone in the office calls him Bud or Buddy?
And it has to be it because all those, at least the four horsemen of the office, they call him Buddy Boy all the time. As I
Yeah,
mentioned, it's annoying, and it's the buddy part is to feign friendship because they're getting something out
right,
of
right.
Baxter, and obviously Boy is kind of setting.
Exactly.
Although Buddy Boy Baxter does have a little bit of fun alliteration.
Like no one's ever heard of someone just calling someone Buddy or Bud. They thought that was his name. Like,
They say that more than anything else when they talk to him.
I mean, I guess,
The
yeah.
guys, at least.
Mhm.
Honest mistake.
Sure. That no one has corrected.
We'll get on there.
Yeah, there you go. So, in addition to Best Picture, The Apartment won 5 other Oscars: Black and White Art Direction and Set Direction, Best Director for Billy Wilder, Film Editing, and what I assume is original screenplay. It was called Writing, Story and Screenplay Written Directly for the Screen. I thought it would be fun to go through the other movies that were nominated that year to see if we felt that The Apartment was, deserving or not. But here are the other movies that were nominated for Best Picture that year: The Alamo, Elmer Gantry, Sons and Lovers, and The Sundowners. I have never heard of any of these. I'm just going to say that I think The Apartment deserved it because
no, no biases here.
no biases. I mean, there is only one of these movies that I think is pretty popular all these years later, so I'm saying. So in terms of the movie holding up, I don't know. I think I like this movie even more now. I love this movie. Now that I've watched it in a more in-depth way and had to take notes about it, I feel like I just fell even more in love with it. Jack Lemmon is so charming, and I could see Shirley MacLaine being a rom-com leading lady even like in any decade. She just had that, like when they talk about the it factor, I just felt like that was it. Fred McMurray is a great villain, probably why I got shades of noir at certain points. But also, like I said, Billy Wilder is one of my favorite directors, but I think I appreciated the writing so much more this time around now that I was like taking notes about it.
Yeah, I did like the writing. I liked the reveal camera shots. Obviously, I can't say if it held up for me or not. It's my first viewing. What I like about the idea of this podcast, besides just talking about movies with a friend, is that we get to watch movies we might not have watched on our own,
Hmm.
and it's fun, but sometimes for the purpose of the podcast, it's hard to take everything in for a first viewing to enjoy the film as it were,
Hmm.
dissect it a little bit,
Hmm.
but also take notes. That being said, I still enjoyed it. The overall story, I guess, seeing it for the first time in 2025 and not knowing
Hmm.
anything about it
Yeah.
was a little jarring, I guess.
Yeah.
The whole concept of all these married men using his apartment
Hmm.
for less
Definitely.
than favorable activities. It was fun.
All right. Well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll discuss Joe's movie pick. All right, well, welcome back. And now we're going to discuss Joe's pick.
So my pick was Gladiator, directed by Ridley Scott. Release date May 5th, 2000, and it was rated R. If you haven't seen this Roman epic, at the time when Rome was at the height of its power, the current Caesar wanted to return it to a republic state. He wanted to do this with his most loyal and trusted general, Maximus. However, things don't go as planned, and Maximus goes from a general to a slave to a gladiator to the defiant voice of the people in a quest for revenge, justice, and a dying wish of a fatherly figure. First time seeing Gladiator, I'm assuming I was in high school based on the year it came out. I do not think I saw this in theater. Pretty sure I didn't even rent it. This is a time I think we just got a DVD player. DVDs were pretty cheap to buy at the time, and I think I was old enough for, a high school job, and without any responsibility, I just had money.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I had
That
to pay for
money
car
goes
insurance
really far when you don't have like a mortgage.
or anything besides
All
car
right,
insurance.
yeah. You don't have utilities.
I was just buying up DVDs because I could.
Yes.
And I think I bought this without even seeing it. I kept hearing it was a good movie. All my friends who saw it liked it. It was up for Oscars and won Best
Hmm.
Picture. That's why we're talking about it today. So I just bought it
Hmm.
blindly. And I was doing a lot of that back then. And
Yeah.
I've seen it a couple times since, but it is a longer movie, 2.5 hours. And I don't think I've sat down and watched it in a long time.
Yeah, my experience is actually really similar. I know for a fact that Gladiator was one of the first DVDs my family and I ever bought when we first got a DVD player. There was one Christmas where the family Christmas gift was a DVD player, and Gladiator was one of the discs that we got. I know that Moulin Rouge was another one. But yeah, I don't think I've seen Gladiator since I was in high school, probably since, when we initially bought it. I will tell you that I remembered very little about this movie, except that when it won Best Picture at the Oscars, Elizabeth Taylor was presenting, and she did that when she opened the envelope. She was like Gladiator in that weird like high pitched voice. So that is honestly like the only thing I thought of when you picked Gladiator was Elizabeth Taylor saying Gladiator.
So random.
Oh, it is.
Ugh.
Yep. And I think she like almost opened the envelope and just announced the winner like before even announcing the nominees or anything. I just remember it being kind of like a mess when she presented Best Picture.
Looks sort of like your film, but different. We open on text on screen. This kind of gives us a little brief history. Well, at least for this film, what's going on in Rome. I want to make it clear that some of these characters are real,
Hmm.
but the story is fictitious, but based on real people and events.
It's historical fiction.
So we open on text on a screen and it just kind of catches up to date about the Roman Empire, the war they've been going through, how they're just expanding, and throws a bunch of long names at you. And the second we see them, I forget who these names are and how I can relate them to the people
Yeah.
who are portraying them because it's been a long time since I've seen this movie.
Yeah, I realized watching this, especially the beginning when they're more at battle and, there's this big army. I think I have the same problem with war movies that I do with sci-fi, where I'm just like, I don't know, there are all these people and their positions are different and I can't keep everyone straight. And, the only person, it's like, I knew that Russell Crowe was in charge. That's about all I got right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. At least
Yeah.
for this example, you see the very classic, memorable shot of Russell Crowe in like a wheat or barley field. And he's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like walking through it and grazing it with his hand. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like this is his happy place mentally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is I'm assuming maybe his farm back home that he misses. And we see the shot a few times throughout the rest of the movie as, worse and worse things are happening to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, good point. Because he does later, when he talks about home, talks a lot about farming and
Yeah.
his crops. And yeah, for me specifically, this was like the only shot I really remembered from this movie before revisiting it.
Yeah, they use that in marketing a lot. So I think what we're in Germania, it's the last
Hmm.
stronghold against the Roman Empire.
Mhm.
And Maximus is there and they're getting ready for battle. I was confused for a second because off in the distance, kind of higher up, elevated, was a bunch of people in blue. And I actually kind of thought they might have been priests of some sort, not realizing that was Caesar. He's an old man. Of course, he's not going to go to battle. And like you said, they just throw a bunch of characters at you right away. They don't even like refer to anybody by
Mhm.
name yet. It's just so
Yeah.
fast.
So I didn't realize that Caesar was used as a term like king. I don't know if that was like real. When you say Caesar, to me, I think of Julius Caesar.
So
Um,
I got confused too because again, the history is a little rough. It's been a while since I've been in a classroom environment where we would talk about this. I had to actually kind of look it up as well. Had to pause, take a breath, and go, okay, Caesar is basically saying my king.
it's like a title. And the only reason I kept it straight was because current Caesar in the movie is Marcus Aurelius,
Hmm.
and that was a real person. That was a real emperor. The only thing I know about him is that he wrote meditations, he practiced stoicism. So I understood who Marcus Aurelius was. I just didn't realize they use the term Caesar as a
Hmm.
title.
Anyway, we are in Germania. We're getting ready for a battle. And they were waiting on somebody, it seems like, to give them the go ahead, right?
My impression was they had sent someone to kind of like negotiate and to see if they would surrender or if they were going to battle.
Right.
I did want to just make one little point when Maximus is like either walking or riding his horse like through the troops. They're all kind of like saluting to him with like lifting their swords and like saying his name because that is something we see repeated in various places. Based on the little conversation Maximus has with someone else, my impression was they were trying to get them to surrender, agree to terms or something.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way. And they answer
Mhm.
very affinitively. We're going to call him the negotiator.
Yeah.
He comes back headless on his horse.
Yeah.
So that's a no.
Um, that's a no. All I could think of with this opening, and I don't know if this is going to make sense, but the opening of Braveheart, and in Braveheart, at least you see more of the aftermath. You see the dead body, you don't see it happening, but like, well, I guess you don't really see it happening in Gladiator either, but it's still like this jarring violence that you're just like, okay.
It sets the tone.
It sets the tone, exactly. Yeah,
Your
I
quote.
I do like the line. I don't know who this man is standing with Maximus, but he says, after they realize the Germanians are not going to surrender, this man says, "People should know when they're conquered." And Maximus admits that, Romans wouldn't just allow themselves to be conquered either. I don't know, like, what are these people doing? Like, just gonna keep conquering things for Rome, and this is gonna bring peace? Our little text in the beginning said, like, this is the last group of people they have to defeat, and then there will finally be peace in the empire. And it's like, I don't know though.
It's time for battle. Caesar's watching on high,
Mhm.
and they're getting ready. They're getting the catapults ready, their archers ready. And you had pointed out something about is it okay for the cavalry to be in danger? The answer is yes. Sometimes, if you're the cavalry, you're going to get an arrow in your back on accident. It happens.
We see Maximus go off to this like side group of soldiers on horses that I assume are kind of lying in wait in the woods. He tells the men, "Imagine where you will be, and it will be so." Kind of telling them, like, imagine that you've like won this war, like we're good. Imagine this battle's already over. And I was like, "Oh my god, he would be so good at manifesting on, like, Instagram." Like, that's that's all, like, Instagram coaches do. They're just like, "Manifest where you wanna be, and it'll happen." It's like, you don't have to do anything about it.
Well, he's trying to be a good general and get the men less scared and ready
Mhm.
to fight,
Yeah.
which, makes sense because they're all probably going to die. I
Yeah.
do like when he's talking to them where he says, imagine where you're going to be and you'll be there. He says, when if you see yourself in a green, lush field
Mhm.
surrounded by your friends and family and loved ones or something like that, he's like, well,
Mhm.
don't worry because you're already dead.
Right.
Like you're where you're supposed to go. So
Yeah.
it's a win-win, I guess.
Yeah, so we're unlike Hercules, we're imagining the afterlife in this movie as, like, a very peaceful, like, happy place. I do like the line he says, "What we do in life echoes in eternity." There are a lot of grandiose quotes in this movie, but, like, it works.
Oh yeah, it
Also
totally works.
also because, like, what the Romans did in their life kind of did echo through eternity, actually, so
We're painting this picture that obviously the Roman Empire is very mighty, But
Mhm.
as they're getting ready to fight this battle, there's a little bit of off balance. They have the archers, the catapults, men on horseback, probably a lot more men.
Mhm.
And we see their Germanians is almost like, they refer to them as barbarians. They
Mhm.
have
Yeah.
wooden shields, axes, very unkempt, no armor really.
Yeah.
So we kind of get the idea that they're not going to win.
I was honestly, like, immediately sucked in, like, this was working for me, like, the music, the edits, I was like, "Alright," like, we're just immediately dropped in, we're hooked.
Hmm.
I will say the slow-mo wasn't really working for me. A little further into the battle, they're kinda more so fighting on foot, they've lost their horses, and that you get a lot of slow-mo kills and injuries, and that read as a little cheesy to me. And also made it feel dated?
I
Okay.
was going to bring up the slow mo too, whether now or later on, but I definitely noticed it during these scenes, and it does feel a little jarring. I don't
Mhm,
know if it was a choice for storytelling or just
mhm.
it was the thing to do at the time. It felt like maybe they didn't shoot it in slow mo and they slowed it down because it felt a little choppy to me. Like it was
Yeah,
going too fast where we couldn't see what was going on. Not that the things we were being shown were as
were
important,
necessarily super important, right?
but it felt a little of the time. Yeah, we cut to Marcus's son Commodus.
Yeah,
uh
Commodus.
he's just in this carriage, this big ass carriage, very relaxed looking, very pampered looking, very
Mhm.
apathetic, I guess.
Yeah, he's just here for a good time.
Yeah. Apparently so.
My notes say, "This carriage is insane, it's like a tank."
Oh, I bet it's gotta be, it's the son of Caesar.
I don't know, I had never seen anything like a the covered carriage kind of a thing. I guess they were able to lay down in it.
Him and his sister,
Yeah.
which was not the vibe I got originally.
No, having been so long since I saw it, I couldn't remember who this woman was. I thought it was his wife at first. They're
I
giving
don't know.
off the vibes and closeness of people who are, like, in a romantic relationship. She's
Hmm.
talking about how she, like, can't wait to take a bath, and, like, I don't know, I did not realize this was his sister, so
Yeah, we'll get back to that part. So they're clearly not fighting for their father, they're not fighting for their home or
like,
their
fighting for
empire.
anything. That's
They're
they're
not
there lounging.
they're not fighting.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, Maximus is winning the day, and Caesar comes down, and they're chanting for Caesar, and Caesar basically tells him, like, cheer for your general.
To be fair, what did Caesar do here?
Yeah, but that's what you do. You cheer for your king. I guess I get it. I suppose I don't know.
No, I get it. Also, because like, if the king was a different kinda king, they would just kill them for not
Yeah,
cheering for him, which we might see later too.
but maybe in his aging ways or aging
Mhm.
years, passes credit off where credit is due.
I like this personification of Marcus Aurelius as, like, a more gentle, thoughtful leader, less self-serving, but again, bar's really low because he's an emperor.
He's slowly turning around, as it were.
Slowly turning around in the very last years of his life.
Moments.
Moments, yeah.
So after he tells all the men to really give credit to Maximus, they have an
Mhm.
aside, and he's like, "Well, what do I owe Rome's greatest general?" And he's like, "Can I go home, please?" And we find a little bit later it's been like years, 2 years.
It's been over 2 years, like, almost 3 years, which is insane. He hasn't seen his wife and son in
Yeah.
almost 3 years.
Commodus rolls in his battle tank and comes out, and he's wearing all white, by the way. Like, he's not here to fight. Again, he's just,
Mhm.
"Oh, am I late?" He's like, "I missed the battle. I'm sorry." And his dad's like, "You missed the war."
Yeah.
So this seems like it's a reoccurring thing where he just is just a little bit outside these battles and
Mhm.
somehow keeps showing up in a very inopportune moment, or for him, opportune moment to not have to draw a sword.
I like the idea in general of Commodus always being in white because typically that would signal goodness, right? If
Hmm.
we're going really basic theory here. We will get into a little more later, but for this scene particularly, I really liked the contrast when he congratulates Maximus and, he Like you said, he was not here to battle. His white clothes are perfectly clean, and Maximus is just filthy and covered in like blood and dirt. One of them is doing the work here. It's really obvious.
They have a little post battle party,
Hmm.
little celebration, which is rightfully so. And already some senators are kind of whispering. They're being very sneaky, as we will see that senators do a lot in this movie. And they want to
Hmm.
have more power to the Senate versus the ruling empire, which is like, okay, cool. We don't want this one man making us go to war all the time. And they're kind of having an aside with Commodus and Maximus. And Commodus, who, in all rights and purposes, at least in his mind, is the heir to the throne. So he wouldn't want this, obviously.
Did you mention we see Commodus trying to make an arrangement with Maximus on the side to kind of shore up the empire whenever Marcus Aurelius dies?
Yeah, this is that scene. The senators are kind
Okay.
of talking to both of them. They're trying to have two asides, but together. They're all
Okay.
talking about the same thing, but different ends.
Gotcha.
They're
Okay.
both Commodus and the senators are trying to sway Maximus in either direction. I feel.
But I feel like this is when we start getting the impression that there's a lot of history between Maximus and this entire like royal family because I mean, we know he's close with Marcus Aurelius, the current Caesar, but it almost sounds like he grew up with Commodus and Lucilla being the sister.
He had a relationship with Lucilla at one point.
Right, because this is when Commodus makes a comment about like, "Oh, Lucilla's here. Wouldn't you love to see her?"
Hmm.
And the way they talk to each other, there's like an old friend vibe going on. I feel like Commodus kind of assumes he can rely on Maximus because he's so loyal to his father, but maybe not.
While that's going on, Marcus and his daughter are talking, and we see that Marcus Aurelius doesn't really favor his son. Really, just a quick aside when he says, "I wish you were born a male," to
Yeah.
his daughter, who he clearly favors.
Mhm.
Does not trust the moral compass of his son. The stage has been set. We got the senators trying to get Maximus on their side. Commodus wants him on his side.
Mhm.
The people are on Maximus's side, so he's polling pretty favorably, so to speak. So then Caesar calls for Maximus, and they're having a discussion in his tent. Marcus Aurelius wants to ask Maximus if he would be like a sort of regent for him when he
Mhm.
passes temporarily, and this is like his last chore before he can go home. You have to do this one thing for me, and he
Yes.
wants him to go back to Rome to give the power back to the Senate, to give the power to the people. He wants Rome to be a republic again.
Maximus is just such a good soldier, and I mean that literally and figuratively
Hmm.
because Marcus Aurelius says, "Why are we here?" And Maximus says, "For the glory of the empire." And I feel like in that sense, like you believe Maximus probably would do whatever this guy wants, but also he hasn't been home in over 2 years, so he's really tired. I also think he doesn't think he could do such a big task. They're basically talking about remaking the entire government, right? Because you
Right.
wouldn't have an emperor anymore, you'd have the Senate, which would be doing the will of the people. Marcus Aurelius mentions that for all the time he's been emperor, there's only been 4 years of peace, which, like, again, probably your fault because you're just
Right.
like conquering everyone. It's like they did all this and they finished it and then we just saw like a lot of people die very brutally and Marcus Aurelius is like, "Why did we do this? This was kind of pointless. My whole reign has been pointless." And it's like, "Oh, okay, well, nice to know that Maximus has sacrificed his like time and his health
Time
and whatever." Yeah.
is men.
I found it interesting that Maximus mentions he's never actually been to Rome, the center of the empire, but I guess it's enormous, so maybe that should
Right.
not be surprising. In modern geography, his family's home is in Spain. Is that right?
I would imagine so because he gets the nickname the Spaniard.
Right.
So I'm assuming he's Spanish.
But yeah, I can totally understand Maximus's hesitation, but also it's kind of like, well, if there's not going to be an empire anymore, like, what did I do all this for? Marcus Aurelius specifically says he feels that Rome is too corrupt to last much longer. Again, like, he's a current emperor. He could have, like, done this instead of conquering Germania or whatever, but that's fine. He maintains that Maximus is the right person to do this specifically because Maximus does not seek power. He doesn't want this kind of role, and that's why he's right for it.
Right.
He specifically says that his son Commodus is not a moral man. And I feel like there's some delusion on Marcus Aurelius's part here because he really doesn't anything kind to say about his son and then goes so far to say he's immoral. So why do you think he would be okay realizing he's not gonna get to be emperor? Long story short, Marcus Aurelius gives Maximus until sunset to make his decision.
Not a long time.
Not a long time, no time to, like, talk it over with the wife or anything.
Well,
Um,
no, because he'd have to write a letter. And, why didn't he write this down? Like like a
right?
will or something. That's the other thing we were complaining about watching this. He's like, I'm just going to tell the one guy I trust, which I get. You trust the one guy, but you're not gonna like write on a piece of paper with your special Caesar seal of approval and
Mhm,
make it
mhm.
happen because you're an old man and you've been dying for 10 years.
Yep.
Anything could happen.
Lack of trust maybe to those around him because, like, it is a big change. I absolutely had that thought, yes.
And he runs into Lucilla, and she has a very brief conversation. Basically, she knows what's going on, kind of.
Mhm.
Not officially, but she basically
Sh
says, "Yeah, I know how my father favors you."
I like that Maximus is so moral that he can't even lie about
Right.
this. Like, he doesn't exactly say, like, "Yeah," but he, like, can't even pretend like it's not true.
And she's concerned about the decision that he may
Mhm.
or may not make. I like your quote here: "Will you serve my brothers? You serve my father. I will always serve Rome."
Mhm.
So it's already kind of conflicting.
Yeah, and I had a hard time getting a read on Lucilla, like, honestly, through this whole movie. When we are first introduced to her, well, not in the carriage, but in when she's talking to her father, and he kind of implies she would have been a better ruler. Now, she's asking Maximus if he will serve my brother, and I feel like she's making sure she's going to be able to hold on to her proximity to power with her brother becoming emperor.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Um,
Yep.
I was immediately confused because I felt like they set up this dichotomy between she would have been the better choice, not her brother. Like, she would have been a better ruler, whatever. But then this exchange with Maximus, like, I'm not sure. I do like this little part where Maximus goes in to talk to Cicero. Maximus asks him, he's kind of vaguely relaying his problem to Cicero in terms of what he would like to do, which is go home, and what he's kind of being called to do by Marcus Aurelius. And Cicero says, "Sometimes I do what I want to do. The rest of the time, I do what I have to do." And I feel like that is pretty much everyone's life in the year 2025. So not much has changed.
Yeah.
Gotta go to work. Wanna stay home and watch movies all the time.
Yeah, this is true. I also like that this is a, I forget the actor's name, but is a young Scotsman who is probably famous for Sons of Anarchy.
We cut to Marcus going to have a very serious talk with his son.
Yeah, again, this old man version of Caesar, he's reflective and maybe feeling a certain way, and decides to be honest with the person he's stripping of title and power
Mhm.
in a one on one conversation in a private tent, who he just mentioned doesn't trust.
And
Maybe Caesar's senile.
okay, I couldn't help but feel for Commodus a little bit in this scene because Marcus Aurelius comes in and says, "Are you ready to do your duty for Rome?" And I'm sorry, sir, but how else would he have taken that? He lays out his plan to Commodus. Commodus is obviously upset. And he says that there was a point where his father wrote him a letter listing his four chief virtues: wisdom, justice, fortitude, and temperance. And he realized in that moment that he had none of them. Commodus realized this about himself, but he says, "Don't worry, I'm ambitious, I have resourcefulness, and I'm courageous." Not on the battlefield, we point
Yeah,
out.
I don't see how he's courageous, but that's fine.
My note is Marcus Aurelius having deathbed realizations about republics and parenthood.
Oh, it's 100% what's happening here.
Okay, okay. Everyone
Um,
needs therapy. It's
Yeah, he probably shouldn't have led the conversation with that line. Are you ready to do your duty for Rome? Because he's probably assuming I'm taking the mantle.
yeah.
And he's like, all right, well, your duty is to step the fuck out of the way
Right?
and take a seat, take a back seat. And of course, he's upset. And like you said, they have this back and forth. I'm not a good enough son. And he's like, well, that's because I failed you as a father. Yeah, again, where's the assurances here? Why didn't you write this down? You told now two people your secret, both in private.
In Marcus Aurelius's defense, like, he probably thought he had more time.
Let's assume that he wanted to tell Maximus because he gives him till sunset to make a decision. So if he would have
Mhm.
said no, what's the plan B? I guess letting my son rule as, was originally to be played
Mhm.
out.
Mhm.
I guess. And then maybe if you had a witness to that, there would be, whispers in back alleys that we can't trust Commodus because his father didn't trust him. So maybe there's a political aspect of that for Marcus. He wants
Yeah.
someone to take the throne. No, he doesn't. That's the problem. He wants the Senate to take over, and so then if Maximus says no and goes home, if someone else heard that, now it's tension between his son and the Senate. So
Maximus.
as they're having their therapy session, and I guess Commodus is giving his father a great old big hug, so much so that he smothers him to death. This is definitely on purpose. He feels betrayed, and he's basically quite literally taking the throne from his dad.
Feels betrayed is also power hungry, which we could tell from, the opening of him in the carriage. It's like this is really all he's been waiting for his whole life.
So, I mean, I guess he is ambitious, resourceful, and courageous. Maximus is taking a little thinking nap, I suppose. And he is woken up and told that Caesar needs him right away. Come quickly. He doesn't know that it's the wrong Caesar. Or the new Caesar, I should say.
I do love this reveal though. Maximus is heading toward the tent. The tent like whips open to reveal Commodus standing there. And obviously Maximus is stunned. Commodus just says, "Our father is dead. Mourn with me, brother." And this is, part of why I have that impression that like they have a history.
Yeah.
Maybe not literally growing up together, but they've known each other a very long time. And like it's well known that Maximus thinks of Marcus Aurelius as a father figure. I assumed Lucilla knows what Commodus did because when they're alone, she slaps him, but then immediately after pledges her loyalty to him.
Right, because she has no choice. I think Maximus assumes what happened, and I think Commodus knows it too. So
Mm.
when he calls him his brother like that, I feel like he's testing the waters on where Maximus's loyalty lies.
And I think maybe also signaling to him that he will still be welcome into the fold as long as he is loyal.
I think he says something
Mhm.
like, "You served this Caesar, will you serve another?" or something like that. Maximus just walks out. He just leaves. He gets arrested by one of his men, who
Mhm.
is obviously now being told by the new Caesar,
Mhm.
and he is to be taken out, ridden until sunrise, and then executed.
And that his family will join him in the afterlife. Yeah.
Maximus, of course, loses his shit because
Right.
they had nothing to do with any of this.
Just like crazy to me how fast allegiances change. And I know that's the society. Like this is the emperor now, you do whatever he says, but to think that I believe it's Quintus is the guy's name. He
I
was
think
literally
so.
just, fighting a battle with Maximus side by side. And I was like, oh, okay, well, now you need to go be executed. He has seen firsthand everything Maximus did for Rome and for Marcus Aurelius. So you would not exactly call him a traitor.
It's a little muddled here because
Hmm.
who is he supposed to be loyal to? So take him out. Sun comes up.
Hmm.
They get ready to execute him,
Hmm.
and he's one of the greatest generals for a reason. That's just because he has a smart mind for battle, but he's
Hmm.
also a badass.
Hmm.
And he headbutts the guy who's about to execute him, takes his sword,
Hmm.
murders all the executioners.
It did stick out to me that there's like one guy left who's on horseback, and I don't think he realizes what's going on. Maximus calls him over, I think calls him by name. He knew these people that were about to execute him. He starts riding back home to try to save his wife and his son, but we see that it's intercut with the soldiers getting to his house and killing his wife and child.
During his escape, his battle gets injured. They cut him pretty badly in his left shoulder.
Hmm.
And he's camping out, and he's just, I don't know, they must have had a day's head start, but he like feels like we just missed the boat on getting there in time to warn
Hmm.
his family. Pretty brutal, and it's very heartbreaking.
Again, things that hit harder, I think,
Hmm.
when you have a kid. Because you see his son, like, get knocked down by the horses, like, riding up, like, the soldiers riding up, and, later when Maximus gets home, he knows he is too late because his wife and child are, like, hanging. They also, like, burned all the land and, like, killed the farmhands, like, everyone.
Everyone. Maximus's son sees the approaching small band of army in the distance, and he gets excited because we haven't seen his dad in 2 years, and is assuming it's them. They're far away.
Right.
And he's just in the middle of this little pathway or whatever, and he just gets fucking run over, man. It's pretty hard.
Later on, there's some verbal description of what happened to them, and it's just, like, horrible. I never thought of myself as such a softie, but, like, ugh, this bothered me.
I remember this bothering me 20 years ago when I watched it. So yeah, it's tough. Maximus comes home obviously too late, as we said, and is emotionally upset, physically exhausted,
Mhm.
mentally exhausted. Takes proper care of his family's remains, buries them, and just passes out, only to be woken up by being captured by slavers.
Talk about, like, adding insult to injury, like, he's literally passed out on top of his family's freshly dug graves, and he gets, like, kidnapped.
Yeah.
So he's kinda, like, in and out of consciousness as he's being taken to wherever by these people. He's, like, in a cart.
He's also fighting infection from his escape wound. This is where we meet Juba, and he tells to Maximus to leave the maggots that we see in his shoulder because it'll help the healing process. They're going to eat the infection. And then he passes back out. While he's kind of going in and out of consciousness, we see again that wheat fields shot. We
Mhm.
see his family off in the distance. There's a stone wall that the camera seems to be approaching slowly, possibly having visions of the afterlife that he
Mhm.
wishes to go to.
Yeah, reunite with his family. I could have done without that shot of the maggots in his arm for, like, the rest of my life. That was
Well, sorry,
it's okay. I mean, you didn't direct this.
I did not.
Um, mhm,
So they're in Zuko Bar, and he is sold by the slaver to Proximo,
mhm.
who is well known as a gladiator trainer.
He has a branding on his arm to signify he's part of the Roman legion, and Proximo just assumes he's a deserter. Later, when I guess he's a little more, I don't know, conscious, he and Juba have both been, like, sold to Proximo. They kinda start to form a connection, and you see Maximus kinda, like, scratching the branding off his arm, and Juba says, "Is that a sign of your gods? Will that not anger them?" And for Maximus, it's gods being, like, the emperor, the new emperor, right? And, yes, of course it'll anger them, and so Maximus smiles and is like, "Yep."
Yeah,
So Maximus is in his fuck Rome era.
yeah. Fuck around and find out.
Yep.
They're about to find out soon enough. So there's a little training sequence. They got this big hulking man that would probably be a bad guy in any 80s action movie. I thought he
Mhm.
was like part of Proximo's guy. I didn't realize later he's a slave also. He's just a guy because he's big enough, probably willing to fight for his life if that's what it takes. So he's like kind of training these guys,
Mhm.
and Maximus does not partake. He just lets this guy beat him with a wooden sword a few times. Then he gets halted by Proximo, and he's like, his time will come. We train for 2 seconds, and then now we go to the first gladiator fight we see in this movie.
Mhm.
It's pretty brutal, pretty violent. A lot of people are getting bludgeoned and stabbed and poked and losing body parts. It does seem that the underdogs, Proximo's gang of gladiators, at least the ones that have
Like the
screen time,
newbie.
the three of them, Maximus, Juba, and I think his name is Hagen.
I don't know if we really learned that till later, but yeah.
The big guy. Yeah, they do very well in killing all of the bad guys. In this first fight, they are paired up and chained together,
Mhm.
and the big guy, he has someone who I believe pissed himself, scared,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
does not fight very well. Gets taken down, and to stay alive, the big guy cuts off his hand at the wrist, so he's not tethered down to literal dead weight.
Cuts off the dead guy's hand.
Yes,
Yes.
not his own hand. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and these three just win the day.
Okay, this affected me so much. So they're kind of, like, lined up, waiting for the doors to open for them to be let out into the arena where they're gonna fight, and it's like this dungeon kind of thing that they're lined up in, and Proximo's telling them, like, "I bet some of you think you're like not going to have to fight or you're not going to have to kill anyone. I'm just telling you, like, everyone thinks that and you're wrong. When they're waiting to be released and they know like either they're going to kill people or they're going to be killed,
Hmm.
that's when we see, like you said, the one man urinate, and it's like, don't blame that guy, actually.
Mm-mm.
Like, I think you see this like almost like calmness on Maximus's face because, like, first of all, he's like done this before, if we're being
Right.
honest. Also, what the fuck does he care at this point? He has nothing to lose. If he, like, I'm not saying he wants to die, but what does he really have to live for either, if we're being real? I appreciate that they showed more than just Maximus because it's like, imagine being sold into this situation, and this is just like, it's terrifying. I'm just glad they showed kind of some of these other people who were like, why am I here? Like, definitely don't have the physique or the strength to be like doing this, but you have to because this is a thing they did. Like, I can't believe people actually watched this. So, okay, I was a little confused. There's some men who are already like out in the arena and they have like better armor, better weapons.
Hmm.
Are these like quote unquote professional gladiators or like people who have like risen up in the ranks through matches?
I would assume yes. And also, I feel like, lack of a better term, they're the home team. I believe Proximo and his men travel a lot, and that's how they make their money.
Oh, right. Okay. I get what you're saying. So one of these guys who's already, out in the arena, better, more suited up, he's like swinging a mace right in front of the doors so that when the doors open and our like kind of newbie Proximo gladiators run out, one of the guys immediately gets like clocked in the face with this mace and like he's out. And it's obviously like bloody. They're not shying away from showing you stuff. I had to watch this movie while my son was homesick, and I was watching it in another room on a tablet because I'm not insane. I'm not going to watch this in front of my kid in the living room. Of course, though, this is when he comes by to tell me something and I have to pause. But pausing doesn't help either because I'm pausing on this guy being, decked in the face with the mace. So I just like threw the tablet over because I was so frantic. Like, you can't see that. So anyway, like Ghostbusters too, paused at like the head on the spikes. This podcast is going to like harm my child.
That's a cool shot, though. Show him outside swinging the mace, so you just so we know what's going on. Because then we go back inside the gates, and it's kind of a slightly upshot from the Proximo's gladiators' point of view because they're waiting to go in, and you just see the door with the light behind it, and you hear the
Mhm.
whoo, whoo, whoo of it swinging,
Yeah,
and you see the
mhm,
shadow come across their faces with whatever
mhm.
little light they have coming through the door. Definitely starts building the tension before all the chaos.
Just extra cruel that they were, like, chained in pairs, like, it's, quote, unquote, "lucky" that Maximus and Juba already kind of seem to, like, have a connection, they work together well.
While that's happening, Commodus is returning home from a battle he never had. And but he
His battle to become Caesar.
yeah, to strangle an old man. But he returns home to celebration. People are throwing flowers at him, cheering, and already some of the senators are kind of whispering to each other that he doesn't deserve this.
Mhm,
He arrives home as if he returns from war,
mhm.
which everyone knows he didn't do anything.
There is, at least someone in the crowd who yells "usurper" at him,
Hmm.
which, to be fair, I might not have caught if I didn't have the subtitles on. Like, even though it looks like this grand celebration, not everyone in the crowd is cheering, but it's also shot so dark. Like, it's very gray. The sky is dark gray. It's like the gloomiest celebration. I guess I was a little confused why the senators kind of are so suspicious of him because, we assume no one else knew about Marcus Aurelius's plan of succession. Maybe they just know he's not going to be a good ruler.
I think there's that, and I feel a lot of people suspected foul play. The last time Marcus was seen alive was with Commodus, and then he wasn't alive.
Mhm.
The maths.
That's fair. There's a part where there's like one particular senator who seems very much okay with Commodus being emperor, let's say.
So they have a Senate meeting,
Mhm.
Commodus and the senators, and they're trying to catch him up on problems happening in Rome and beyond. And he doesn't have any experience, and he thinks that just having a senate is obsolete.
Mhm.
He's like, they're talking about the plague and how we need to stop it from spreading and this and
Mhm.
that. And he's like, yeah, whatever. My dad was worried about this stuff. I'm not.
Right. Yeah, they literally say like we have to address these specific sanitation issues to stop the plague from, getting out of control. And Commodus says they just need love.
And then one of them retorts, have you hugged a man dying from the plague?
And then to your point, he talks to Lucilla separately about dissolving the Senate, I guess,
Hmm.
thinks they're obsolete. He tells her to leave the people to their illusions. Marcus Aurelius's wars achieved nothing. No one cares about Germania specifically, but the people loved it. They love victories. They love the idea of greatness. They love an idea of a great Rome.
Hmm.
Mhm.
They're
We
making Rome great again.
He says he's going to give the people a vision of Rome so great that they will love him for it while they're actually dying of the plague and like whatever else problems are going on.
He doesn't want the Senate, but he wants it to, or he's convinced to keep him around
Mhm.
because it'll give the people that illusion. Now, I also think that Lucilla is using choice words to kind of manipulate Commodus to not be so
Mhm.
crazy and do all these
Yeah.
things, like get rid of the Senate.
Let him have like a little crazy, but don't go too far.
While he is mulling that over, he's talking with two other senators, and he just decides, we'll bring the greatness back to Rome. We're going to make people cheer. He's kind of distracting them from this potential usurper thing, the plague that's going to kill everybody. So he puts out posters for bringing the gladiator fights back to Rome, which his father had gotten rid of, by the way, in Rome
Mhm.
proper. And so there was a conversation with two senators
Mhm.
about how there's 150 days of games and that how Commodus is distracting them as he is slowly dismantling the Republic. Yeah.
No correlation.
150 days of games. That is quite a bit, by the way. That's
Also,
exhausting.
imagine the plague spread. Forget sanitation. Let's have 150 days of everyone packed in a stadium together. Commodus says he's going to give the people of Rome fear and wonder. This is a recurring theme. He calls Rome the mob. The people of Rome are the mob. He says he will conjure magic for them and they'll be distracted. He'll take away their freedom and still they'll roar. He'll bring them death and they'll love him for it.
I just wanted to watch a movie from 2000 about Russell Crowe beating everybody up, but the whole Senate shit was a fairly big pill to swallow.
Yeah, this is when the movie took a turn for me personally. I was
Yeah.
like, am I enjoying this anymore? So we cut to Maximus in another gladiator battle. Again, because of how it opened, I thought they were just like arriving in Rome because these kids were like running out to see the gladiators. No, still not in Rome yet. I liked though that the gladiators in this like cart they're all in are honoring Maximus the same way soldiers used to. They're all like he's going to fight like an individual match, and as he's walking out, they're all kind of lifting their swords and chanting Spaniard, the same way his soldiers used to do. Yeah, he does fight a number of people by himself. Sorry, it's not like a one-on-one match.
No, I thought it would have been because he's going into to battle, so to speak, by himself. And then you just see like five, six, seven dudes
Mhm.
in armor. I'm like, oh, and one at a time, he just
Mhm.
dismantles them very quickly, efficiently, brutally. Crowd cheers.
Mhm.
He couldn't care less.
Sure, there's some cheering, but it's mostly quiet because this is when he says, "Are you not entertained?"
Well, that's when the crowd erupts, though. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, okay.
They're quiet
Because
because it happens oh so quickly, and they're here for an event. They want to see
Mhm.
it unfold.
Oh, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
The quick deaths aren't exactly the exciting deaths, but yeah, that's why he
Right.
says that line, the very famous line,
Mhm.
and they cheer for him anyway. And he's just
Mhm.
like, I can't. What am I going to do? Like, I don't want to do this. I have to do this.
Mhm.
I don't do it the way they want me to do it, and still they cheer.
Yeah. Yeah, he thinks his job is just to kill people, and this leads to his conversation with Proximo, where Proximo explains to him that, like, you don't just have to kill people, you have to make the crowd love you.
Yeah, it's not just winning; it's winning the crowd.
Mhm,
And here's where he explains he'd been called back to Rome.
mhm,
So it's a homecoming for him because he also explains that he was once a fighter.
mhm,
And Maximus asks him, "Did you win your freedom?" He says, "Yeah, I was granted to it. I had my freedom from Marcus." And
mhm.
he's like, "You knew him?" He's like, "I didn't say I knew the guy. The guy
Yeah,
touched me once on the
yeah.
shoulder and gave me a wooden stick. Like, calm down, bro."
Give me a wood stick. He gave him, like, a carved sword
His name on
that's,
it,
like,
which
a symbol of his
signifies.
freedom, yeah. Proximo explains to him that he was the best gladiator because the crowd loved him, and if you win the crowd, you'll win your freedom. My read on this, though, 'cause you do see a kind of renewed sense of purpose in Maximus. He is more interested in the part where they're going to Rome to perform for the emperor, maybe
Well,
not so much the freedom part.
yeah, specifically though, Caesar of past
Uh-huh.
personally gave him the free. Like, I was so good, I got
Mm,
to
mhm.
meet Marcus Aurelius. And
Yeah.
he said, "Yo, you met him?" "Oh, you don't say." All he
Yeah,
wants
yeah, yeah.
is to be in front of Commodus
Yeah.
for maybe 3 seconds.
Yeah, 'cause he says, "I will give them something they have never seen before." Which
Hmm.
is probably killing their emperor somehow. So we cut to a little scene of him talking with Judah. Judah has a family back home, but he assumes he'll never see them again. He says something like, I will die soon, but even if I am to see them in the afterlife, I'm going to be waiting a really long time because they hopefully will not die anytime soon. And Maximus explains that his wife and son are already in the afterlife waiting for him. And again, just like incredibly sad and me not understanding how all these men ended up here. I do really like the part where they arrive in Rome. I forgot that Maximus has never actually been to Rome proper. They're all in awe of the Colosseum, and they do make it look very wondrous and enormous.
Hmm.
You can see how it's enormous compared
Oh yeah.
to these men.
Or
Um,
even just where they came from, where the past fighting they've done have been in these little pits,
yes.
small stadiums. Like, you could,
Hmm.
some of these stadiums they're fighting in can be like Shakespeare in the Park. Like, they're tiny, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So then we see um, Commodus kind of lounging about in what looks like a bedroom chamber. He's just like staring at this little boy sleeping. It's very
Hmm.
creepy. But Lucius, the boy, is the son of Lucilla, and she's watching Commodus watch her son, and she's very uncomfortable. She clearly does not trust whatever's going on here. I felt like maybe Commodus is kind of thinking that either A, this is my heir, I will put him under my wing and train him because he has no kids of his own,
Hmm.
or maybe he is afraid that this is my heir because I have no kids of my own.
Yeah.
And she does not trust, I think, either direction of where this is going.
Hmm.
And just their interaction. Oh, God, yeah. Yeah. If we haven't mentioned this before, I feel like he has a thing for his sister.
Right. Yeah, this is when I personally started to wonder if maybe Lucius really was the son of Lucilla and Commodus. I couldn't tell how one-sided some of this was. Commodus makes it a lot more obvious that he has certain inappropriate feelings for Lucilla.
Hmm.
Lucilla, we know, has been married. Her husband has died, though. And I do think that Commodus calls Lucius his heir, either in this scene or some later scene. So that's also what made me wonder about it. Or maybe just like truthfully, he would be the heir because Commodus does not have any sons. I also wondered if Commodus is sort of taking out his weird issues with his father on Lucius and thinking he could be this like great father figure, especially because Lucius has lost his father. Because he already thinks he has like a better vision for Rome. Maybe he also thinks he could be a better father. And
Yeah.
somewhere in here, he mentions to Lucilla, I think, that he's planning to announce the dissolution of the Senate during the games.
So after that, we cut to Proximo's gladiators kind of hanging out in their quarters in the
Hmm.
Coliseum, kind of set up like a prison, but kind of not at the same time. But they
Yeah.
have a gate that kind of accesses or can be seen from the outside.
Hmm.
And this same little boy runs up to him, and he knows him as a Spaniard. It's a reputation that he's gotten as a great fighter. And
Hmm.
Maximus is, I guess, kind of like you and wondering why this kid is allowed to watch these fights. And he asks
Yeah.
if his dad lets him watch it. He goes, "Oh no, my dad is dead," and he names his dad's name. And I feel like there's a little bit of recognition in Maximus's eyes
Mhm.
of his father's name. And I
And the
think he
last name at
realizes
least, yeah.
is Commodus's nephew. And all of a
Mhm,
sudden he's
right.
like all paranoid looking. He knows he's in Rome, but he, I guess, didn't realize that Commodus would be here.
Maybe right here, yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
I think it's safe to assume that if Lucius is watching the game, at least his mom would be. So there's the chance for his identity to be outed
Hmm.
before he can do whatever he wants to do with
Right.
Commodus. But yeah, he does ask him like, "Does your dad lets you watch these games?" Like, yes. Why?
Right.
Someone think of the children. I also was not quite following the whole like this matches the reenactment of the Battle of Carthage.
The bigger the stage, the bigger the theater.
Yeah. Well, and they're
And
also trying, I mean, 150 days of games. They got to do
they
something
gotta do
different
something
once in
besides,
a
yeah.
while. Yeah.
Luckily, they're doing this because now they get costumes. And
Hmm.
Maximus is in a, not that I think they'd be able to see him from way on high at their sit where they sit, but
Agreed.
he has a mask to cover his face.
Proximo's guys, including Maximus, are supposed to be the barbarians that Rome
Yes.
defeated during this battle. So it's like a real battle that took place. They're reenacting. Only important because of how it ends.
Yeah, they are, to the Roman Empire. They are playing the bad guys, and the, again, we'll call them home field advantage. The home field gladiators, they are playing Rome, obviously.
Hmm.
So they get into the middle of the field, and Maximus is asking them if anyone's ever been in an army before, the
Hmm.
military of some sort. Some of them say yes, and he tells them they
Yeah.
have to fight as a unit. They have to
Yeah.
act as one, or they will be just slaughtered.
And we do see that that's the case because anyone who kind of it does not follow Maximus's commands during this battle or kind of steps out of line is like almost immediately killed.
And I mean, they're given a little bit more proper weapons than we've seen. They have these big shields, they have
Mhm.
helmets, they have protective clothing on part of their
They have
bodies
like
that are,
armor, some
yeah,
armor.
some armor.
I do like how this starts though, because, they walk out into the arena for the first time. They were already in awe of the Colosseum. They're still in awe of it, like while inside it. Although I thought it was funny because they give them very specific directions. Like you have to salute the emperor before you start and you can't turn your back on him.
Hmm.
And immediately they come out, and I did not realize the emperor was not like seated yet, but they immediately come out and they're like looking up and turning all around, like taking this all in. And I'm like, did you guys just totally forget the whole like don't turn your back on the emperor thing?
Right.
And then at the very start of this battle, they kind of like open the doors for the other side to come in, like the good guys, as you were saying. And I wrote, oh my God, the other side gets horses and carriages.
Oh yeah, they get all the good stuff.
Hmm.
The wheels of the carriage, they have these elongated spikes, and
Hmm.
we see it literally go through a person who is in the way of it.
Yeah. That is actually you talking about like the woman who kind of like she's
Yeah.
on the Roman side and she like lifts up her hands and screams and is immediately cut in half. And like that is the image that is like still in
Hmm.
my brain from watching this movie. So yes.
Yeah. But long story short, they band together, they
Hmm.
overturn a couple chariots, take over some quote
Decisive
unquote,
victory. Yeah.
yeah, rewrite history for this, theatrical play of violence.
Hmm.
So much so that even Commodus says something like, "Oh, I might not remember my history correctly, but weren't we supposed to win that?"
Yeah.
And but the crowd loves it and cheers. And one of his men or senators says, this one guy, the Spaniard, is like really well known, and he's like the star of the show. And so now Commodus wants to meet him.
Didn't realize this was a thing that like Commodus could just like go out on the field, so to speak, and like meet gladiators, but why not?
Hey, he's wearing another awesomely white suit. He's got to show that thing off.
But so Commodus comes down into the arena. Maximus, this is when he refuses to take off his helmet because he doesn't want to reveal his true identity, right?
Well, right before this, he's Commodus is coming through the gates, and everyone starts to kneel. I think
Hmm.
Maximus actually starts it because he sees an arrow in the dirt, and he
Hmm.
bends down to put his hand over the tip of the arrow.
Hmm.
We're presuming he's going to get close enough to probably stab him in the neck.
Yeah, something like that. Hmm.
But then we see Lucius come running in and literally like stands right in front, in between the two men.
Yeah, so Maximus, you could see in his body language, like, he kinda stands down.
He doesn't want to kill this kid's uncle in front of the kid, I should
Him,
say.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kinda surprised at how openly defiant he is, like, just in terms of, like, playing the role. I know he doesn't wanna be outed, but also if he's, like, so disrespectful, they're just gonna, like, kill him. He won't reveal his name to Commodus, he just says his name's Gladiator, and then he walks away, like, he turns to walk away, and everyone's like, "Oh my god," because he
Yeah.
turned his back on the emperor.
Denied him everything he asked for him and then just about faced and walked off.
I really do enjoy, though, his when he does finally acquiesce, turns around, takes his helmet off, his helmet that is also a mask. He gives this little speech about, like, exactly who he is, naming all his titles, not just saying, like, "My name is Maximus."
And everyone's surprised, obviously. Probably most of all Commodus, because he was supposed to have been executed.
The entire crowd starts chanting "Live," meaning they want the emperor to spare this gladiator's life.
Well, all of them. I think
Why?
at one point,
Oh, all
after he
okay.
realizes it's Maximus, like he has all his guards at the ready to kill
Oh,
all of the
maybe
guys.
that's why, because the guards kinda, like, come like, stand at attention. I guess I wasn't assuming like, I didn't understand why that was even a possibility that he might kill the people who, like, won the battle, but I think the guards kinda make some moves toward him.
But the crowd was entertained, and
Mhm.
they start chanting for them to live. Because
Mhm.
obviously they don't realize that Maximus was supposed to be executed, and
Well, yeah.
all the betrayal and all that kind of stuff. They just see that he's being a little defiant and obviously pissed off Caesar. And but they're like, no, keep him around. This is fun, entertaining me, and like bring him back for tomorrow.
Um,
And reluctantly, he gives them the thumbs up.
and everyone is chanting Maximus's real name when they're, like, lowered back down into their, like, dungeon area. Also a callback to, how he was treated in the army, this respect that he earns, like, apparently everywhere he goes because the other, like, gladiators who are waiting are also, like, chanting his name and kind of honoring him. I really like this next little scene where Commodus says he is terribly vexed that Maximus is still alive.
I'm vexed, terribly vexed.
Some other hints to, Maximus's past relationship with his family. It sounds like maybe he dated Lucilla because Commodus is kind of saying to her, like, well, don't you also want to see him, like, hurt? Because didn't he hurt you? And I do think it's interesting. He says that he was lied to back in Germania. They told Commodus that Maximus was dead. I guess I assumed they knew he could still be out there somewhere because the execution team never came back. Like, who was left to tell him?
I guess if I have to draw conclusions, that whoever was in charge of sending that team to kill him,
Mhm.
they clearly didn't come back, and he's like, "Oh shit! Oh yeah, by the way, they totally did that thing you told me to tell them to do." I think someone was covering their ass.
Maybe that Quintus guy,
I
yeah.
doubt that like these executioners reported directly to Commodus.
We cut to Lucilla arranging a meeting with Maximus, like, in prison. They
Yeah, he is now segregated from his team and chained up.
or do
Obviously,
the
kind of.
gladiators just spend their nights in prison when they're not fighting? Is that
I believe so because they're not free people. But I think that when someone comes to visit, they get chained up because there is a
Oh,
brief
yeah,
statement that sometimes women will come down and pay to be with a victorious gladiator.
right, okay. That is
So I
right,
think
I
they
remember
have to
that.
do that for safety, I guess. Yeah, she explains that she needs Maximus to trust her. I wouldn't say rekindle the relationship, but rekindle the trust they had
Mhm,
before
mhm,
her father died. And
mhm.
she needs him to meet a senator, and she needs him to kill her brother. And
Yeah.
he says, hard pass.
Basically, yes. All I could think this whole scene is I don't know if Lucilla is lying to him or not. Does she really live in fear of her brother? Did she really not know that Maximus's family would be killed? I mean, she literally like slapped her brother as soon as their father died, but she does say that one great line, "Today I saw a slave become more powerful than the emperor of Rome." And I remember that from all the like trailers and stuff for this movie.
I'm with you on the lack of trust. I feel some of the things she's saying is true, but others are not. She probably knew his family was dead. I do think she is afraid
Mhm.
of her brother.
Maybe, like, now she is. Maybe she wasn't so much before. Now that she's seen him, like, threaten to dissolve the Senate, and he's like she's seen how he actually is as an emperor, maybe now she is. And she also
Yeah.
did walk in on him, like, watching her son sleep, so but I feel like at this point, Maximus has kind of, like, lost all his humanity, whatever moral compass he had earlier, he just wants to kill Commodus, and that's pretty much it. Because she even kinda pleads with him to remember her father's vision for Rome, and he's like, "I don't care."
You're right. Yeah. He's done
Yeah.
with that.
Mhm.
So, to appease the masses
Mhm.
for the Spaniard, which is now Maximus,
Mhm.
in the eyes of the fans,
Yes.
he gets to fight again. A one-on-one battle this time with what is apparently an undefeated champion.
Who, like, came
So,
out of retirement.
yeah. This guy's decked out with all the weapons and all the body armor, but of course, things aren't as they seem. Commodus says he has something up his sleeve, or he's made arrangements, I believe what he actually says.
Mhm.
And you wonder what that is. Well, as he's fighting this undefeated champion, we see other guards come out and they grab onto some chains that are hidden under the dirt. And depending on where Maximus was in the arena, they opened up, I guess you can call them like hidden
They're like,
compartments, or
hatchet.
and tigers come out to attack him. So he's got to fight this dude and some tigers on chains.
The editing worked so well for me during this because I wanna say there are maybe 4 tigers in all that, like, pop out at, unexpected times, and he's really right in there, like, Maximus is always right practically on top of these hatches when they open them, and it's, like, in front of him, he's trying to fight off this undefeated gladiator who, like, has better armor than him, like you do. Everyone
Right.
always has, like, an advantage over him, but then from behind, these hatches are opening, these tigers are trying to, like, snap at him, even if they're already out, even if he knows where they are, it's like he has to protect both sides at once. Thought it was insane though that people are just holding the tigers back on chains and you can just like bolt that down to something.
Well, I think if you bolt it down, then the tigers are kind of in a fixed point, and you can get around them. I think they have them on chains that they're controlling is to give them a little lead to get to
Yes, yeah.
Maximus, but also maybe to prevent the tigers from getting the champion.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, because we do know that Commodus kind of orchestrated this as a way to kill Maximus without literally killing Maximus himself and like losing the crowd.
Yeah.
Basically, because even Lucilla, playing her role here says like the crowd is fickle, brother. They'll forget him in a month. And he says, "Sooner than that, it's been arranged." And this is when, like, the tigers start popping out. I like that this undefeated champion he's fighting, he has this mask that's almost like it's like a neutral facial expression, almost like the drama symbols, except just like a straight mouth, and it made me feel like he was just fighting this inhuman figure because you don't see any emotion coming from his opponent, and I'm pretty sure the opponent was bigger than him too, if I'm
Oh yeah.
remembering correctly. Yeah, so it's like it just makes him so much scarier to me, but then also you get that honestly very cool shot when he is injured. He kind of leans down and like the blood is dripping out of the mouth of the mask because
Yeah.
he's like so injured. I did think it was interesting when Maximus defeats this guy. I feel like all the situations we've seen him in, people are killed like kind of instantly or like at least like during the battle. This is the
Right.
first like one-on-one I think we've seen, and the guy's on his back. He's like seriously injured and Maximus is, like, waiting to see if he should kill him, or I think maybe the emperor decides if he should kill him.
Yeah. If you don't die right away, like you said, if you don't die fighting, the crowd and or emperor will give their vote. The thumbs up, the thumbs
Right,
down.
yes.
And I guess he was waiting for that.
Yeah, that must have been it because you have in your notes here that Caesar votes for death.
The crowd chants death. Caesar thumbs down, giving the permission to kill him. And instead of killing him with that axe, he just throws it aside and walks away.
Mhm.
Defiant. Again, crowd cheers anyway. They were just cheering for this guy to be put to death.
Yeah.
And they cheer that he is alive now.
Talk about fickle.
Well,
But
yeah.
during that, I was kinda wondering if, like, these people really deserve a republic considering they just, like, are very bloodthirsty. 2 things about this champion. 1, imagine coming out of retirement just to, like, die, basically. Because as far as this guy knew, like, when he was on the ground like that, he was done. And for all we know, like Commodus is going to have him killed later for like screwing up.
Oh yeah.
Two, imagine being that in that defeated position on the ground, the anticipation and the waiting, like, but like the quick death is one thing, but this guy just laying there waiting to see if your emperor is going to decide whether you live or die. And that seems worse. um, but yeah, now he's Maximus the Merciful and everyone loves him even more. And this is completely backfired for Commodus.
Yeah, he's always seems to be behind the eight ball, Commodus. So he goes down there again. Okay, he just goes down whenever he wants to go talk to the fighters.
Yeah.
And this is where he is in Maximus's face and kind of talking some shit. And whether it's true or not, I don't know if it matters, but he, as you said earlier, verbalizes what had happened to Maximus's family.
Yeah. And it's horrible. And I mean, good for Maximus. He's like a stronger person than I would be. I don't know. Because he just kind of he lets it go. Like obviously Commodus is trying to goad him
Mm-hmm.
because if Maximus lunges at Commodus, attacks him, whatever, he's within his right for Maximus to be killed. I don't know what he does. I think he just lets it be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good scene here with the long shot on Russell Crowe as he's being told all these horrible things, and he slightly diverts his eyes from Commodus's. He's welding up a little bit, fighting back tears. Body tenses up a little bit. You know what he wants to do,
Right.
but he cannot. Not yet, at least.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the time.
Yeah. He's
For
playing the
whatever
long
reason.
game, and good
Yeah.
for him. So during this fight, we saw Cicero, his old squire, in the crowd. After this confrontation, we cut to Maximus kind of being like led back to his quarters by, guards or whatever. And Cicero's trying to get his attention from the crowd. And they
Yeah.
manage to like get close to each other. Kind of Cicero pretends he's someone who's like congratulating Maximus on his win. And Maximus says, "Tell the men their general lives." And Cicero manages to pass him something, which ends up being like the carvings of his wife and son that he had in his tent while he was serving in the army.
Now it appears that since we know Maximus is alive,
Mm-hmm.
that some of his old men are reformed in the outskirts of Rome,
Yes.
just waiting for the green light. Because I'm assuming most of them know he was set up to be executed.
If Commodus was told that he was executed, I'm sure word got around that he was executed. And I'm sure most people were like, why?
Mm-hmm.
But why? Because obviously he was well loved.
Meanwhile, Commodus literally is crying that nobody loves him and everyone loves Maximus more than him, and boo-hoo.
Love to see it.
Yeah, he's throwing a little Darth Vader tantrum here.
He says he can't kill Maximus now because he will be seen as merciless because Maximus spared, the loser's life. Every day he lives, the mob and the Senate grow stronger. There's that one nasty senator whose name I never learned who urges Commodus to just kill Maximus, despite everything he just said. But Commodus maintains he'll just turn Maximus into a martyr.
After that plan kind of is talked about, I'm like, that's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
He was telling him this long story about a fish that lays at the bottom of the ocean,
Mm-hmm.
and its predators will slowly closer and closer and even start taking little bites out of it before it attacks, because he lets his enemies reveal themselves, kind of letting Commodus know that there might be people loyal to Maximus that we might want to see them come nibble on us before we attack. Because if you just kill Maximus, then everyone's gonna be like, "Oh yeah, we love you, Commodus," but he wants to see where everyone stands.
Unfortunately, very smart on their part. And Lucilla overhears some of this. Particularly, they mention having every senator followed to like see where their loyalty lies.
Mm-hmm.
We see like at night, Cicero meets with Maximus again through like a gate where he's staying. He says the men from his old regiment are like fat and bored, but ready to fight for him again. We see a show out on the street, like kind of a puppet show where people are pretending to have Commodus fight Maximus, and they outright say Maximus is defeating their emperor. Like in the puppet show, they have the emperor lose. Oh my God, foreshadowing.
Right. Yeah.
Cicero manages to talk to Lucilla on the street and tells her that Maximus changed his mind and he will meet with the senator that she had mentioned working with. Yeah, so this is Senator Gracchus. This is the only one whose name I learned. Um,
Fair enough.
he had said earlier at the games that he is not a man of the people, but for the people. There's an earlier scene where they're like surprised he came to watch the games because they're like, I didn't think you liked this. And he's like, I don't. Gracchus has trouble believing that Maximus will just hand over power once Commodus is overthrown. He just doesn't believe that people do that.
And that's fair. I mean,
Mhm.
Commodus didn't, but they make a deal. Like
Mhm.
they're gonna have Gracchus is gonna buy his freedom, release him out of the city, reunite with the army, and in 2 days return to overtake Rome. And that's where the part of the plan that kind of scares him because now he's gonna have an army in the city.
Yeah.
Once you're there, would you give up the power?
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't fucking want this shit, man. I'm doing this because I'm asked to do it. I'm doing it because I promised
Mhm.
Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah, like Marcus Aurelius had a certain vision for Rome, and this isn't it. We cut to him explaining the whole plan to Proximo, which I was like surprised they were looping him in, but I guess he's going to be bought by like the
Right.
senator, so he has to know this. Proximo says that the plan won't work because the emperor knows too much, it's too dangerous, and I guess he is swayed by Maximus saying he killed the man that set you free because
Mm-hmm.
we see that Proximo seems to revere Marcus Aurelius. And then the next scene, the palace guards come to pick up Senator Gracchus.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were being followed, so whoops. They weren't as sneaky as they thought, I suppose.
Yeah, and I really thought that Lucilla had overheard that part about the senators being followed. Like, because we saw her kind of listening in.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why that all have to happen right then and there. It's like we got to do this now because
Mm,
we are being watched.
yeah.
But unfortunately, they knew too much. So they come to where they're staying, and Proximo and the other gladiators, they don't open the gates right away. They're demanding to come in. Proximo gives keys to Maximus, and he unlocks all the gates, and he goes to escape, and all his other men, and by this instance I mean the gladiators, stand their ground and fight, letting him escape for the good of Rome. He goes through some tunnels and finds some gear that was left behind for
Mm-hmm.
him. Obviously, this was all set in motion.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes out at the end and he sees Cicero on a horse in the distance, and he calls his name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Cicero yells Maximus's name in a close up, which we see there is a noose around his neck, and he's
Yes.
trying to warn him that this is all a trap.
Mm-hmm.
And then they scare the horse, and there's no more Cicero.
Yeah, that
So
was
it's very,
brutal for
yeah, it's pretty
Cicero.
sad. And
Um,
Maximus gets captured again.
we skip the scene where Commodus makes it clear to Lucilla that he knows everything. Basically, what happened is he was sword playing with Lucius. Lucius says, like, some people are calling Maximus the savior of Rome. And Commodus says, well, who calls him that? And Lucius whispers something in his ear, and I guess we assume he's spilled the beans.
Yeah, don't tell a child all your secrets.
Yeah,
They have no
jeez,
filters.
Lucilla. Yeah. And yeah, there's this like really terrifying scene where Commodus is sitting at a table with Lucius, right? And
Hmm.
Lucilla comes and sits across from them. Commodus kind of starts talking about different emperors like Cleopatra, like sometimes royal ladies do very silly things in the name of love, and Emperor Claudius, who was betrayed by his own family. And Lucilla is like getting the point here, and he is just completely terrifying and unhinged. And from this point onward, I was just like, Joaquin Phoenix is such a great villain. I don't know if he got any recognition for this. I'm pretty sure Russell Crowe won the Oscar for this,
Russell
but
Crowe won, but Joaquin was nominated for supporting. But in the
hmm
same kind of sequence,
hmm
after Lucia kind of gets the vibe where, yeah, you might kill my family,
hmm
or you understand that we betrayed you.
hmm
Later, in front of the bad senator, he is saying what's going to happen, and if she doesn't comply, Commodus will kill her son, and that he demands that she loves him, and that they're going to have an heir, a proper heir, a full-blooded heir to the throne.
yeah,
So, if you were wondering if Lucius was his kid or not, he is not.
he
Like
is not.
he's
Yeah, that's my
saying, you know what,
answer.
we're going to have our
Pure
own,
blooded son.
yeah,
Yeah.
to rule for 1,000 years. He said, yeah, he's
Yeah, he's
gone off the
insane.
rails. Yeah,
Back at the Colosseum because Maximus is not actually free.
he's chained up again,
hmm
right? And Commodus comes up to him and says they're going to fight. Like
hmm
we're just going to end it here in the battlefield. And if you think the man can't fight, there's a very, very brief scene earlier in the film after he missed the battle where he's like training with guards and he's doing a lot of
Mhm.
sword play. I think that's just so we know he can fight a little bit at least.
Yeah.
Because he's not as decked out as all these bigger guys
Mhm.
Maximus has killed in, the gladiator pit.
Mhm.
But nothing is ever fair. And when he calls him his brother and gives him a hug, he stabs him, I think, in the side or the back. I'm assuming puncturing a lung,
Yeah.
since I think it's between the ribs. He tells the other people, the guards, whatever, he tells them to, cover up the wound and get him ready to fight.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
so Commodus knows enough to know that he has to give the mob, so to speak, an ending for Maximus's story, and he says only a glorious death will do for someone who's at this stature now. But also, he rigs it because
right.
he's the bad guy. While they're fighting, or maybe it's while they're dressing him. I said the slow-mo is back. I did not miss it. Um,
You did not.
although I think my absolute favorite shot of this whole movie is when Commodus is like rising up on the platform into the arena. He's shot from below. He's obviously looking very regal, like maybe even godlike because he's, dressed all in white. The
Hmm.
rose petals are falling down around him, and the way the sunlight is, it's kind of like hazy. I mean, it's a great shot anyway, but I also love that everything this would normally tell us about a character is just wrong. The part that Commodus is playing of like the good guy, the god, because he does think of himself as, the ultimate power. He's the one in charge. I mean, he thinks he wants to have a son who can rule for 1,000 years. That sounds like a god. When in actuality, he's obviously the villain of this story. I thought it was a great shot and a great reading.
I also like when the roses are falling down around them. Earlier in the film, when they are training with Proximo,
Hmm.
I guess he assigns people red, or I don't know what the other color is, but they stamp people with red when they were training for kind of the better fighters. And as
Mm,
they were walking through to the first pit, they had these like weird red roots because they were underground, and they were
mm,
getting this red dye all over them. And
yes.
Judah says, "The gods smile on you. Red is, the color of the gods. They favor red,
Okay.
or whatever." And I thought about that again when the rose petals were falling down all around them. That
Mhm.
Maximus is being favored by the gods. Also, just looks
Yeah.
cool.
I was gonna point out too that, like, Maximus is in dark colors, he's gray, right? So,
Hmm.
like, continuing with this false visual of Commodus, you have what looks like such a clear, like, good versus evil, but the other way
Reversed.
around, yeah,
Yeah.
mhm. But, yeah, even with having a horrible stab wound in his back, surprise, Maximus is a better fighter.
Yeah, he's basically fighting one armed because I don't think he could use the other one because of the wound.
Mhm.
And they have a fight, goes back and forth. Both get overpowered because one is stronger. The same one who was stronger is also injured, obviously.
Mhm.
Knocks Commodus' sword aside. And of course, they're not fighting just openly. They are surrounded by guards. And he turns to Quintus and says, "Throw me your sword." And dude just like gives him 1,000 yard stare, doesn't even recognize him. And he's like, "Someone give me a sword." And they all start to unsheath them. And Quintus is
Mhm.
telling them to put that away. We're going to
Mhm.
have a fair fight.
I guess my comment was gonna be that they're sort of committing a coup at the same time. I don't know how much Quintus cares about a fair fight. I think he just realizes that this whole thing was, like, messed up from the beginning because Quintus is the
Right.
one who kinda
Hmm.
carried out the execution order for
Yeah.
Maximus.
Yeah. And also maybe he's doing that thing he did earlier where he's kind of waiting to see. Because, I don't know, you kind of see maybe he's
Yeah.
turning a new leaf and we're like, okay, we can root for him. But maybe he's like, okay, whoever wins, I'm siding with them.
Yeah, maybe he wants to
I
be on the
don't want
winning
to like,
side.
yeah, I don't
Mhm.
want to give him my sword. Then he dies, and like, oh shit, I'm a traitor again.
Yep.
But Commodus, of course, has something up his sleeve, quite literally. He pulls out a dagger. And this is like while Maximus is he's slowly dying, and he's having another vision of the afterlife, almost like an out of body experience. He
Mhm.
puts his hand out, he's reaching out. It looks like he's reaching out almost lovingly to Commodus, but it's not the case. He's reaching out to his family in the afterlife.
Mhm.
And somehow, as this is happening, he's able to come to at the last second, block
Mhm.
the stab, slowly, dramatically turn it around, and kills Commodus with his own blade.
One point that I had written down about Quintus that I did not make, he might also realize too that the crowd is very solidly on Maximus's side here. And if he were to help the emperor cheat, so to speak, hand him a weapon, which is obviously not like something that happens during a regular match, there's a lot more of that crowd than there are Quintus's or even, soldiers.
Right. Yeah, that's fair.
That might play into it as well. Maximus kills Commodus with his own knife while he is literally on his way to the afterlife. Lucius watched his uncle get killed right in front of him.
And again, Maximus is kind of fading into, he's passing right in front of everyone's eyes, and one of them is like shouts his name, and he kind of snaps out of it, and in his quite literal final moments, his final breath, he's like, "Free my men, free the senators, reinstate the public." Maximus is out, and he just dies. 35 seconds of having power, gets everything he needs to get done, and just he's allowed to go.
Yeah, he like remade a whole government in less than a minute.
Right. While dying.
While dying. Yeah, like I said, literally on his way to the afterlife. So yeah, he collapses. Lucilla runs down and says he was a soldier of Rome and he must be honored. So Gracchus, he steps toward Maximus and he says, "Who will help me carry him?" Like carry him out of the arena. And Lucius is the first one that steps forward. And like, child, you are 8. Like, you do not need to be doing this. Like, someone protect this poor boy.
I never remember that part.
Yeah, he was like the first one to take a step forward.
Kind of the end of Maximus' story there at the very end. And I can't tell if this is in the Colosseum or not, because they show the Colosseum at the very end of the final shot. But his buddy, Juba, he buries the statuettes of Maximus's wife and son. I'm assuming he's burying them on this fresh dirt is probably Maximus's grave. And he buries them, pats them, and says that him and Maximus will see each other again, but not yet.
Yeah, like a nice callback to the conversation they had where Juba said he would probably die soon and never see his family again. It's like the one, comforting thought I had at the very end was like, well, at least Juba can like hopefully go home and he won't die soon.
Maximus goes to the afterlife and he gets to see his wife and son again.
Yeah, so we know for sure he's reunited with them.
Other thoughts? Well, besides the thick layer of political, weight of this film, I guess to echo what you kind of did with your pick, other movies nominated this year for Best Picture was Chocolat, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Aaron Brockovich, and Traffic. I think I've seen all but Chocolat. I thought they were all pretty decent. I like Crouching Tiger a lot, and Traffic was pretty good. From what I remember, I'd only seen it once. Did you see any of these?
Yeah, I've seen all of these. I guess I could see any of them winning, but I could understand Gladiator getting it because it feels a bit more epic. I'm kind of conflicted as to what I would have chosen. Maybe Chocolat would be at the last of the list.
I would probably say the same, yeah.
I enjoy that movie. I don't think it's like it needs to be like Best Picture.
Right. I think at the time I kind of thought Traffic was going to win.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think I would have said Traffic if not Gladiator, but I guess out of these nominees, like I'm not upset that Gladiator got it.
No.
Like I think it's deserving.
It also was up for a total of 12 nominations, 5 of which they won. Obviously, Best Picture, otherwise we would be talking about it right now. Russell Crowe, you mentioned earlier, won Best Actor. And usually these kind of movies, they'll get at least a nomination, but they also won for costume design, visual effects, and sound as well. All checks out, I think.
I was curious how this would land for me, but it's not just some movie that won because it was historical or big or whatever. Like, I think it's fairly deserving.
I know it's been a while since I've seen it. I think it held up for the most part. We mentioned the slow motion parts that kind of felt a little dated and off. For a longer movie, it felt well paced. Things happen pretty quickly, and there's a lot to go over, which is probably why this is a 5-hour podcast. The action sequences are cool, albeit brutal, but the editing was done really well here. I would give it a thumbs up.
For people who are listening to this and not watching it because we don't release video. Joe did, the sideways thumb that Commodus does. Yeah, my thoughts are similar about the parts that seem dated, but like I said, I understand why the Academy felt like they wanted to reward it, and I agree absolutely about the pacing. It was 2.5 hours, and it did not feel like 2.5 hours to me. I also will say I think this is one that would have benefited from me watching it at least on my TV. I was watching it on my tablet because my son was homesick, and I don't feel that necessarily like did it justice. Would have been nice to see on a bigger screen. Um, but honorable mentions for Best Picture winners. For me, Amadeus and Rebecca were the only ones that really popped into my mind, but it was always going to be The Apartment. So
You didn't want to pick Godfather or Godfather 2?
I don't remember typing that. Did you?
I did.
Okay.
For a very specific reason, yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course. God.
Trolling my co-host here. I had a handful of selections. I kind of went down the list of best pictures and had probably more to pick from than I thought. I would say the ones that hit the top of my list, Return of the King, just because it's Lord of the Rings, and why not talk about that? And then Silence of the Lambs, because as we said, genre films don't typically get nominated, let alone win.
Mm-hmm.
And the other two I was really leaning on would be Chicago and American Beauty.
Mm-hmm.
Just all kind of that high school time period for me where film became more of an important thing than just entertainment.
Yeah. You know what my honorable mention is? It's Goodfellas, because that should have won Best Picture.
Oh well, we could do a whole episode of should haves too, but
Yeah, definitely. We'd love to hear your thoughts on our movie picks as well as your own favorite Best Picture winners. You can find us on Instagram at Back Through the Lens Pod and at Facebook at Back Through the Lens. You can also email us at backthroughthelenspodcast@gmail.com. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review. It's the best way to support our show.
if you enjoyed our show today, please give us a like and follow for updates on new and future episodes. Our show is produced by our hosts, Rachel Campbell, and myself, Joe Siomek, with additional help and support from Peter Telep of LPV Productions. Rachel, Peter, and I are also the executive producers. Our awesome logo is brought to you by Tom Faraci, and our wonderful theme song is by Matt Tarek. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more trips into our movie watching past on Back to the Lens. Or the new Caesar, I should say.
Yeah, I love
Little
this.
Caesar.
Oh, jeez. Don't ever ask why it takes us so long to get through these.